Board of Education work session and meeting for November 9th, 2022. We're going to start it at 6 o'clock. And we'll start with the pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item number 2 is approval of the agenda. But I would like to make an amendment to add to item number 10 of Part B of Building Committee meeting for a committee report. We just had a meeting just before this month. Any other changes? Okay, so motion to approve the agenda as amended. Seconded. Moved by John, seconded by Lindsay. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? And now we're going to move into our work session. The first part is going to be a presentation by Doug with the strategic plan, measurable outcomes, which is a good segue into Part B, which is our goal setting, which I'm hoping to at least get started with tonight and maybe set up some kind of framework and the next time put some specifics under the framework. So,
Okay, thank you. And I'm going to be cognizant of the time, so we don't use it all here. If you recall, I had sent a slide deck prior to the October meeting, and it had just a few slides towards the end that we never really got to because we ran out of time. And I'm not going to display those slides because there were just 2 of them. I'm just going to kind of summarize that information for you if you don't have those in front of you. But when we talk about having measurable outcomes in our strategic plan and for our district, the reason for that, in my opinion, is it's kind of what I refer to as the so what. And basically, we talk about all the things we want to do for our learners, for our schools, for our community. And that's all good. And that's all aligned to the things that we've set out to do. But there has to be some accountability and some validity to, well, is that actually making a difference? And so I think most plans try to do that. One of the things I would let you know that we tried to do as a leadership team, and also some of you got together with us in the summer as a group, I think it was July 12th, it was the second day we got together, was we tried to brainstorm a whole bunch of ideas that could come into this. And one of the things we mentioned back then that I think is important is that although you might believe that we have accountability to the state of Connecticut, and I'm not saying that we don't, we have a role in that. It's my belief that our true accountability as a district is to 3 groups, and there's some overlap. One would be our learners, the second would be their families, and the third would be our citizens in Durham and Middlefield. And I believe that our accountability is really for the hopes and dreams of those learners kind of going forward, but also to our community, what having our learners realize those hopes and dreams actually means for our community and for our schools as a whole. So that's where we tried to anchor this design work of the measurable outcomes. So if you're a research person, you know that the terms quantitative and qualitative, even if you aren't, we would propose that we have a mixture of quantitative and qualitative measures to kind of round out this work as we collect it. And what Meg sent out to you that we actually updated since the last meeting is 3 pages of an infographic that Robin designed, Robin from our team at the central office. And if you don't have a color printer, you know, your computer, what Robin did was she designed the measures to align with one or more of the 4 domains that we want our learners to be successful in. And just as a reminder, if you don't have that in front of you, those domains are academics, employability, wellness, and citizenship. And so the idea here is to come up with finite set of measures, kind of like our internal report card that we can, put out to our community for accountability that would measure one or more of those kind of domain areas. And so what we're going to ask you all to do, if you're ready, is as early as our next meeting in December, is to formally adopt these set of measurable outcomes so that we can start collecting the data for the outcomes that already exist or gathered. We may already have it. Some of these are data sets that we already gather or that the state requires us to collect, but also seek out the way to collect this information. I also think it's important that one of the things that we feel like, if our mission and vision, all these things is really what we're about, if we're really about preparing our learners for when they leave us in life, then we need to go beyond what most accountability systems do. And what most of them do is they only measure the learners when they're with us. And that's great. I mean, it's important that we do that, and we will. But I think if we're really trying to make life-ready citizens, employees, people out in the world, which is what the parents want to see, it's what the learners want to see, I think it's what the community wants to see, then we have to make a deliberate effort to actually gather data about whether or not we're doing that well. And I think those of us that have put this together, and certainly myself, feel like if we don't do that, then what is it that we're really gauging in terms of the work that we do here? And I think the other piece I like about this, and I think this is where it makes a nice segue into the board goals, or at least the board goals discussion for tonight, is that I think there's a lot of overlap, but also there was conversation at our retreat for those that weren't there. And some of us have talked about this offline, that there may be a feeling that the strategic plan itself and the learner-centered transformation and all the things that we envision is more of a long-term strategy, and it is, and may take several years to really manifest itself. But in the interim, there are things that we still want to be doing and measure ourselves by. And I think the good news about what we've proposed is I feel like these outcomes are good for whatever we're doing. They're the things that we would like to see, because again, they are the things that our families and our learners told us they wanted to see happen for their children as a result of having a relationship with RSD13. And so really, that's all I had to share, but I guess I wanted to ask the board members, and staff members here can jump in terms of the Q&A as well. If prior to bringing this back to you as early as next month, were there questions about any of the measures that we listed on those 3 pages that you want to discuss tonight? Or if you don't have questions, like, do you like what we proposed? Do you not like what we proposed? I mean, again, this requires you all, hopefully by unanimous consensus would be our goal, like other parts of the strategic plan, to understand what we propose to measure and then kind of get behind that effort. And just for your own kind of walking through those 3 pages, the first 2 pages were all things that we would measure for the learners while they were with us. And the last page is all going to be information that we would propose to gather on our graduates after they leave us.
Doug, are you thinking about measuring employability? Other than
Okay.
graduation rate doesn't really tell us if they're employable necessarily, and it may be your college. It might be graduate life plan survey. Those are pretty esoteric. That would be kind of hard to figure out how to get a handle on those.
Yeah, well, it's a good question, Bob. So first of all, the attempt here was to say, you take something like graduation rates and which, if any of these 4 domains does that support? We feel like there's an academic component to meeting graduation requirements. It's there for employability because many employers require a high school diploma for condition of employment. And so that's why it's there. The graduate life plan survey which again is not something we have right now, something that we would build, would be, do they actually leave here with some type of plan for employment? But I think the real rubber meets the road on this one, when you get to the second and third pages. So for those that don't have that right in front of you, we would like to capture internship participation. We feel like there's a direct correlation between having an internship experience before you leave high school and your ability to actually be gainfully employed after you leave. And then two below that, we also want to survey the employers who take our learners as interns to rate the learner on their readiness to go to work. We feel like those two things would do that. We also think that literacy and numeracy, which again is something we're going to have to define, but some of that we might be able to pull out of our existing, test scores and other things that we have. A lot of employers tell us basic math, basic writing, basic vocabulary are things that they are looking for. And we've also tied the college credit certificates or degrees earned in high school. So these could be directly applicable to a job situation in terms of a job-related certificate that the learner would earn while they were here, that they can immediately go out into the workforce with that. But we also feel like the more college credits that are earned here, if we're talking about employability for someone that's going to pursue a college degree after they leave us, their likelihood of being successful in college and following that career path is there. And then on page 3, we have 3 things that we would try to grab up from our graduates after they leave us. One would be, did they successfully complete college? And because again, a lot of schools will stop at, well, X number % of our graduates got admitted into college. But if you know anything about the national data on college completion, it's pretty bad. Like the percentage that actually matriculate and then graduate, especially in 4 years. If you look at 5 and 6 years, it gets a little bit better. But some parents don't want their kids spending 5 and 6 years in college and having to write tuition checks for that. But then we would ask the graduates themselves if they're gainfully employed and also if they're doing work that's meaningful to them, because we feel like both of those things are a reflection of, did we do the work while we had the learners here to get them on a pathway to not just, they're gainfully employed, they have a job, but they're doing something that they actually like, that they're passionate about. We think that's really an important thing to capture. And then the last one that you may or may not agree has to do with the employability piece, but the families told us a lot that one of their hopes and dreams for their children after they graduate is this idea of financial independence and financial security. And again, we're going to have to figure out how to measure that, but we know there are places that are grabbing up this information, so we wouldn't be starting from scratch. So that's a very long answer to how do graduation rates measure employability. I think the answer is, and this is why we have multiple things in each column, there wouldn't be a single measure of employability. We would measure all of these things. We would propose, report on those things, and hope that all of that in totality paints a picture of whether or not RSD13 is preparing our graduates to be employed after they leave us, which again, based on our strategic plan, is one of the things we've said we feel like we should do. And again, it's not that we're not doing that now. I think the feeling is we could be doing a better job of it now. And if we put these measures into place, we can start gathering this data now and people that graduated 5-10 years ago, not as a judgment of what was done in the past, but just to develop kind of a baseline with all of that. And again, any of you that are parents, and I'm one of them, when your adult children become employed, that is a cause of celebration. And when they're not, it's a cause of concern. And so, of course, parents feel a role in that, and they certainly have that. But I think the school system should try to do that as well. Not as the sole measure of their success in life, but certainly as one that we would take very seriously.
I think that, sorry.
No, go ahead. You're good.
I was going to ask, I think that one category
that you could stick into gainfully or gainful, meaningfully employed. I think you could put it in there. But I always feel that having a breakout for either having, depending on how many years out you're looking, is either having served in the military and being honorably discharged and or continue to serve. And I think that I think that not just right, but having college completion and not kind of honoring that anywhere in that follow-up, I think we can leave out a segment of some of our grads.
Okay. So you would suggest putting that as a standalone measure?
So, I mean, and again, I didn't develop your matrix.
No,
And
no.
so in my mind, I used to always say to my students, come back when you graduate college, I'll give you $100. Thank God I moved, they never found me. Or show me that you've served and I'll give you the $100. And to me, there's that, not all kids are, as the gainfully employed indicates, right? Not all kids are going to go to college and as honorable or more honorable a path as the military. And I think it would bear putting it somewhere, whether it's a standalone or kind of actually named somewhere in the matrix.
So my question for you, and I think that's a great suggestion, and for the group really, and even for our group, because we didn't talk about this. Do we consider that also something that measures citizenship? And I guess where I'm thinking now, as you're talking, Linda, is, and again, I served in the military, so I'm all about that. But there are other forms of public service that people do, and again, if we value public service as an organization and feel like that can be a form of being a citizen, not necessarily here in these towns, you might serve somewhere else, even overseas, if it's like, Peace Corps, the military, or whatever. Maybe we can build that in. And I guess the good news is with this last page, we are envisioning a single survey where we gather up all of this, because tracking some of these people down is not going to be an insignificant effort. And we don't even want to promise to you that we can do that well, but we certainly don't want to put work into it if you all don't feel like it's important. So I think that's a great suggestion.
And I think it goes to the idea of, and I can't help but calling them kids because I feel old, but to have our graduates and anyone who's chosen a life of service, right, or a career of service, whether it be long-term or short-term, like to talk about people who have gone to the fire academy, police academy, and are serving. I think that belongs in here also.
Okay.
Yeah, if you look on the third page, there's a section there that says civic engagement. That's, could you be like a slash, whatever? I mean, I don't know if you want to list everything, but I think that's what you're talking about, civic engagement.
But I think it has to be very clear. I think that's what she's trying to say. It's not inclusive to.
Right, because this
we're
is civic
talking about-
engagement.
Right. When we were thinking of civic engagement, we were thinking of things like, to your point, do you volunteer in your community, either, on the government side, like you all are doing, or even like through a nonprofit or something like that? Do you vote, in elections, things like that, if you consider that a part of citizenship? I think one of you mentioned, it might even be you, Linda, in a private conversation or with the group, that citizenship might be the trickiest one to really try to quantify, but we still feel like it's something we ought to try to do, because, I want our graduates to vote when they leave. I want them to do public service and volunteer, and without that, we don't have boards of education or anything like. And I
Well,
think
we want them to, but at the same time, it doesn't measure a person. It doesn't measure their integrity. That they.
How does this work in elementary? Is this strictly just for high school? Like, we're talking about graduation and this and that, but how are we measuring, like, every year these kids, where their outcomes are coming in,
Okay, so what the most previous discussion was about page 3, which is 100% about after graduation, like what you do,
Right.
what you do in
Other
like,
pages, I'm not sure how you're measuring,
so
first page graduation rates.
Okay, so
time
like,
survey.
yeah, so
your
like on the
service
first,
hours.
yeah,
We're talking
on-
about elementary kids. How is that gonna work?
okay, so the community service hours, I don't think would apply to elementary.
Graduate life plan survey.
Yeah, that's
A lot
that's
in
more
there.
secondary. So the ones that are more elementary, I would say, and group, correct me if I'm wrong, the climate survey
Mhm.
would be elementary. The SBAC testing would be elementary.
But even the second page, internship participation, high school credits, internship success rate. I mean,
Yeah, what I'm if you look at, okay, physical fitness assessments could be elementary. The literacy numeracy at select intervals would definitely be elementary. Community project rates could be. The mental physical wellness survey, I think could be as well. But you're correct in saying the majority are going to be more as children get older, because that's our mission. Our mission is to prepare them, and there are going to be more things that they do the closer they get to graduation that are more tied to what we want to prepare them for when they leave us than at elementary. Now, if you want us to try to add more things for elementary, we're open to that. This is kind of just what we came to the table with for discussion.
I think we need to look at that because I'm concerned if we're not focusing on them in elementary right now, their literacy, their math scores are pretty not great right now. I mean, we need to be focusing from the beginning and getting them up to where they need to be so that when they do get to high school, these things
Right.
are off the charts.
Well, that's in there, the literacy numeracy at select intervals along with the SBAC testing. So I guess I'm asking, what other specific things would you want us to measure in this at the elementary level? Because I don't disagree with
I
you.
think it definitely depends on our goals and objectives too, and this is where I think we're kind of backwards in what we're talking right now, because we're talking about measurable outcomes, but we've yet to discuss and set these short-term and long-term goals for the board. So as much as I really appreciate having this discussion on the outcomes, and I think we need to have another full work session where we're really going through that. I think we as a board need to get to our goals.
Right, I think we need to have a short-term focus
And
on
how
getting
else
these
feels
kids to where they need to be first before we can start focusing on the long-term goals like these. No, I think there's a lot of children who are struggling. 2 years of pandemic really pulled us back. I think we need to focus short-term now, not long-term goals.
Well, the long-term goals need to be there.
They do.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't disagree, but I don't view them as being mutually exclusive. And I think there's a lot of crossover.
I think there is crossover. I just think we're a little
I
backwards right
think
now.
we need,
I had just a couple things. So it looks like it's going to be a large undertaking to find out, how we're going to be measuring these things. And one of my concerns with that is kind of during our last meeting, when we had asked who was in charge of the curriculum, it was kind of like, I think Mrs. Cortero had mentioned it was kind of just like a shared thing. So while we're finding out how we're measuring these things, I would have concerns about who's going to be then continuing to share and, the curriculum duties there, because I feel like more things would be focused on these outcomes. So I would just kind of want to know who's going to be responsible for building these measurable outcomes and how we're going to do that. And then who's going to remain focused on the curriculum while we still have our current curriculum. And then also just measurable outcomes. So if this survey came out to me, there are things that would apply to my typical daughters, and then there are things that would not apply at all to my son, but I still very much am invested in his education and how he becomes independent and becomes a valuable member of society, because the way he contributes is still just as important to me. And I wouldn't want other parents in the community to feel that, their child isn't valued because they're not going to be able to go out and be financially secure without their parents, or complete college, or participate in an internship program. And there's a lot that these children do still have to offer, even though it might not meet these measurable outcomes. And I just wonder if how do we measure that separately? Also, so that these parents don't just feel like, oh, here's another survey that doesn't apply to me.
yeah, that's a really good point. I
So,
didn't think about that.
Just.
No, I think that's definitely true. And we have to consider that in anything that we would put out.
Right.
I would say every parent, regardless of their children's abilities and disabilities, has hopes and dreams for their children. And that's what we're trying to capture. So It could be that some of these will need to include pieces of that, or it could be we need to add some things here that aren't currently there.
I think hopes and dreams are different than measurable outcomes, and I think
Right.
that's where Mariah's really coming from, is that I know there's certain things that my child is under a situation would never be able to get to certain things due to a disability, and I think that's where Mariah's coming from too. So I want to make sure that our outcomes that we're measuring are not just hopes and dreams, but things that are attainable and not.
I like the overall concept, excuse my voice, I had some crazy ninth graders today all day, but this is very common in post-secondary, especially career colleges. The one difference was their graduation, their diploma did not happen until we gathered that information, because it was a part of it was part of the course, basically. Again, that's a huge restructuring as far as gathering this information. I'm sure it's in the early stages now, but that would require a department. You know, post-secondary will have career services, basically. And it was tied to student loans and all that, but you know, how are you going to gather that information? That is, you know, it's not valid unless it's consistent with all the students that are out there. And I think it is a huge undertaking, but I do like the overall concept. And I think that perhaps having some involvement with current students and even alumni that might want to be mentors, et cetera, for kids that are out there. Maybe that could be community service hours. I don't know. There's so many avenues we could take with this. But I do like the idea because it's looking at the student in a real world way versus just what college did you go to? What were your grades? Because as we know, you know, we've had people out there with amazing grades and went to the best colleges and maybe had a difficult life afterwards. And that is all too common. We see.
Do we have Naviance? Do we use Naviance?
We do.
Yeah, in middle school, like at how young, sixth grade? That's what I was thinking is, do we have, and especially thinking about atypical kids is, you know, going through a goal setting process every year where a child sets their goals for the year. It could be part of an IEP when the kids are older and they're into that process as a participant, but it could just be, you know, what are your goals? And then, you know, they set them in the beginning of the year, and then at the end of the year, they go back and they reflect. And Naviance allows, the reason why I was thinking Naviance, right? Because Naviance allows you to do that.
There's a lot of good stuff, you know, tabs.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, so, you know,
Good idea.
to the extent that we can. And in terms of goals and objectives, I agree.
Right.
I think, you know, obviously, maybe not, that's why I sit here. But I think that when we look at goals and objectives for children with IEPs, we look at their IEPs and we look at getting better. And it's constantly trying to get better with our measurable goals and objectives and looking at progress monitoring and data. And I think what we're looking at for all of our students is something more like what we already have in an IEP or individualized plan for our special ed students. Can we do better with our measurable goals and objectives? Absolutely. And that certainly is always one of our goals as a department. But I think that the concept is there.
Also grounding their both social and academic growth in a goal that they set.
Yes.
So even the young kids, I love it when you see a student say, my goal this year is to make 3 new friends.
Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
And so not only do you then measure at the end, hey, how'd it go? How'd it work out? But it's also a tool for the teacher. If a child is bullying or beating up kids or, you know, being obnoxious, the teacher can say, let's look at your goal.
Mhm.
How does your behavior align to what you said, not me, what you said you want to do this year? And then it's an individual measurement. Did you reach your goal? They get to set it.
And maybe if we did build on that unified program, something like community service hours, which the elementary children can't participate in now, but they could do something like a unified program early on, which would open doors for them getting involved with community service down the road.
I don't think it's a definition of what community service is. Some districts say 1 hour per grade you are in, right? So first graders are doing an hour's worth of community service. It's obviously not on their own, you know, just ship them off and do something, but it's something like maybe it's unified sports, or it's, you know, just
Cleanups.
yeah. And so by the time you get to 12th grade, it's a 12-hour commitment.
Well, I'm hearing that some people like the overall concept. I'm hearing other people have concerns that we shouldn't, the hopes and dreams should not be anchoring this piece of it. I think a lot of our work that's currently defined in our strategic plan around learner-centered education is really trying to drive us to do a lot more for children than we ever have. And I'm just a personal believer, because I've done strategic planning. This is my third district now, that where most plans fail is they don't really measure the things that are the most important. And as a result, you know, I mean, it's scary. It would be scary to go out with all of these because we might not like the results that we would get or that we're seeing. But I also feel like unless you're willing to get those results, like what is really your basis for our success or lack thereof? What it a lot of times reverts to is somebody else's measure of success. And I'm one that used to be in the somebody else's business because I was all about like the state measures and the test scores and all of those things. And those things are important, but that doesn't seem to be what is making a difference to our families when we ask them. They don't really care what their child scores on a particular test. They want their child to graduate and get into college or get a job and be happy and be financially secure. And so if we don't feel like we want to take that on, far be it for me to say we have to. I just think it's the right thing to do by our children and by our community. And I think it would give us a chance to distinguish ourselves from others, not at the expense of those other measures. That's why we've got the test scores and other things in here, but typically your systems are just going to be limited to your test scores and your graduation rates. And maybe a few other things that are sprinkled in.
In the task groups that you set up to look at the various aspects of this thing, there are many, many steps in there for elementary and young learners that are not captured here, but are captured in some of these steps.
In the action plans, right?
In the action plan. So it might be important, you know, for us to capture some of those action plans that are leading to elementary as an interim step. This is really looking at, was the strategic plan successful in the end, not during the process.
Like kind of both.
Well, a little
I
bit
mean,
of
but
both,
to
yeah.
Amanda's point, it doesn't grab up nearly as much with the younger learners as it's grabbing for once they get to kind of like middle school, high school level, and certainly after they graduate. So I think that's a good point.
Is this something that you did in your last district, these measurable outcomes?
These exact ones?
Or just similar, is it similar to what you did?
Yeah, we had, some of them were very similar. I think some of the ones in my last district where they actually became places for us to focus, like the internship piece. My last district, we weren't doing a lot in that space, but
So this is
the
completely new.
the strategic, what's that?
This is like a completely new concept that you.
The concept
Well,
of,
these measurable outcomes, facing them. and Looking at all of this like this.
I think it's pretty common to try to align a set of outcomes to your mission, your vision, and the other pieces of your strategic plan. That's a pretty standard thing that all strategic plans should try to do. And when they don't, you have to question, were you really serious about that work, or does it just sound good? And I don't mean that disrespectfully to anybody else's strategic plan. I've even been part of some of them. It sounds good, but then there's no priorities. That's why I gave the internship example. In my last district, we were able to grow the number of learners each year that got out into internships, where prior to that, almost nobody was doing them. And because we were measuring ourselves on it, it became a priority for the district. That is also in our district strategic plan that we've outlined, where we said we want our learners to get out and do more work-based learning, job shadows, internships, things like that. So that's why that measure is there. But like I said, this is just a draft at this point, and really the point of it was to facilitate this discussion. And like I said, it's I don't almost to Mariah's point about, you know, division of duties and even Jamie's and all of that. I don't want to ask the staff, any of them, to really start going heavy into researching, developing. Again, some of these things probably other people are doing and we can just take them on. Or even collecting the data, if you don't think some of these data sets are valid and really belong in the plan. And conversely, if there's things you think we ought to be measuring that we haven't listed here, we want to hear from you too on that. And that's where I feel like the alignment with any board goals would be there, because I think you guys have heard me say this before, and like, I think when we communicate out to our public and we talk about board goals, and then we talk about measurable outcomes for the district through the strategic plan, in my perfect world, they're all together in one place. So the public just says, this is what RSD13 is all about. And so that's why I thought if there's anything you saw in here that you thought should be a particular point of emphasis, to consider that is what we're asking.
In the past, the portrait of a graduate has been, or citizen has been developed. So when you look at that, I don't have a copy of it right here. I'm not sure, those would be what we're looking for as outcomes of our students when they graduate. Does that align with this? Because they should align together. And then if you look at those individually, which we don't have copies of right now, how much of that is specifically for secondary level or primary level or whatever, you know, how does all that fit in with some of the questions we've had here?
I don't know that I can
And I
speak to
can't,
that
because we don't
directly,
have the-
except to say that there's really good work in that portrait of a citizen. And I think it aligns, but I don't know. I think where it gets tricky is a lot of those portraits and profiles, and just about every district has something like that now. They try to measure specific skills like collaboration. And we can try to do that, but why do you need to collaborate? I think you need to collaborate so that you can get along well in life and be employed and be able to get along with people and all of that. So I think what we're trying to capture here says, if all those attributes are realized, so what? If you can't get a job, if you can't be financially secure, if you can't get along with people, if you
These are
don't,
measurable, the others are not.
that's correct.
But I'm wondering if the board takes a look at those plus this, and
We-
thinking about some of the topics they brought up, like special needs and military, elementary level, and see how they fit in together. That might help.
Sure.
Once, and
I
of
mean-
course, we need to put our own goals in there as well.
Well, especially because, you know, many of us at this table were not here when that portrait was
Right.
developed by the district. I mean, you may have been here in district, but not part of the process. And from what I could tell, and I might be wrong, there was never like a formal adoption implementation. It was very close, but then COVID came.
Mhm.
And so there might even be some additional work that we need to do, but you know, that's been considered in all of our processes. But again, your guys' input on that would be extremely
I think maybe
critical.
we resend a copy to everyone so
Okay.
that they have that as something to use.
Yeah.
Because that is your overall kind of like conceptual ideas, what we really would like our students to be. These are more measurable because they're more concrete. And then we'll see how they come together and where we may want to add some other pieces to it. Any other thoughts?
You know, I think
It's a good start.
this came out of the same ideas. The ideas that came out of the groups that worked on Reimagine and came up with this, with the strategic plan, were the same ideas that came up with the portrait of the citizen. The concepts are the same, the words are different. But the concepts of how are we gonna rethink how this school gets, they're all in here, and in the task groups, a lot of the steps in there are really short. It could be short-term goals in meeting some of these things. I mean, we have a lot of these things like the academic content areas should be combined wherever possible. Well, what does that mean? Well, it means that when you're teaching science, you're including English and math into it. at the same time, and do we have a curriculum that addresses that? Or can we create a curriculum that addresses that? Or do we send kids down to sound school where they learn everything related to the ocean and water? And, those are concepts that are good models for us to look at. So, I mean, you can go through these things and you try to prioritize what are the steps that are necessary for us to start looking at we're not going to measure success on year one on these, we can't because we haven't anything to compare it to. But we can measure, some of the steps that we've said are necessary to get there. We can start to measure some of those things as an interim activity, and if we're committed to doing that, and you broke up the competency into grade levels. That committee, and that committee maybe can produce 3 or 4 issues that should start us. We need to have people starting us doing some of the stuff, not just writing about it. So, if we could have those committees come up with, here's 3 things that could be done this year, and here's 3 things that could be done, in our elementary school, and so that we have concepts that are, people can agree that, yeah, this is a good measure where we're starting, because you're not going to get, this is the end product. And it's, you'll have pieces of information, but it won't be comparable to what we did last year or the year before.
And I think to Bob's point, in all honesty, I think we're so disconnected in what we're all talking about, because our action teams are meeting. Some of us are on some of these action teams, and some of us are not on any of these action teams. So we don't have regular updates on them. When we're talking about student achievement, we're talking about subcommittee. These are our action teams, but they're also more or less subcommittees. So the board really doesn't have enough information on what the action teams are doing. So what I would like is possibly even an update after each meeting from the action teams to know what's going on, because it's hard for us to make any kind of goals and objectives when some of us don't even know what one of the action teams have done. Like, I know the action teams I'm currently on. I hear Bob talking about competency. You're on competency, right?
No, I'm not global.
Well, he's on one. He's at it, just Larry. But I think that would really help us as a board,
I think you were talking about being on different pages. These outcomes, to me, I look at these as your end outcomes. But when you're looking at the individual competencies, how we're broken up by grade levels, that's where you're going to get your specific outcomes, grade level by grade level by grade level, which are all going to lead to this. This is like the final piece. And even though we might be thinking about a special education or, well, military is different, or elementary, that's where all those pieces are going to come in. They're concrete pieces that are going to lead to this. This is kind of
but I
like the
think
end result, and we're missing all the other pieces.
correct. And that's what I'm really concerned about. So
Yeah.
we're talking about next meeting of improving measurable outcomes. Yet I don't think many of us
Doesn't-
have a handle
It
on
doesn't
what.
sound like we're ready for that.
I'm confused. I've been confused. since the
Okay, so
beginning.
that's my whole
Yeah.
point. Which
I mean, there is gotta be a there's gotta be a baseline of what we want our kids as far as a baseline, whether it's with their math scores, their English scores, or whatever that may be. In order for them to at least have to get to this somewhere at the high school level. I'm thinking this more measurable outcome stuff is more of a high school thing than it is an elementary school thing, in my opinion. But you still have to give them that baseline for them to be employable, whether we're gonna send them out to an internship. They gotta have that math skill, they gotta have that English skill. But if we're not measuring what those outcomes are at the elementary school and middle school, what those specifically are, and that's why we keep talking about goals that we still don't have in place. Well, this is fine and dandy, but if they don't have that baseline, they're not gonna be successful in any of these things, in my opinion.
The thing that
In
was,
common world, you come and work at a police department and you don't have,
I
common
just want to
core stuff.
remind you, when they came up with the portrait of a citizen, they didn't start at the bottom. They started at what do we want going out the door? And that's what this piece is. What
that
do we
those are
want
great,
going out
but
the
they
door?
still need a
Then
baseline.
they go back and they started to fill in the
So
rest
let
of
me-
it.
But that's where my confusion is, because
Yeah.
I don't have.
Well,
it.
and I'm sorry about the confusion. Let me try to help explain a little bit, and part of this will spill over into the next part of the meeting, but we are intending to build a competency-based framework in each of these domain areas, all the academics, employability, citizenship, and wellness. And there will be competencies starting in kindergarten, potentially pre-K. I don't know. We haven't really talked, sorry, Jen. But you know, and so that will be measured at the school level by the teachers, communicated to the families for each individual learner. What this is trying to grab up is, how do we say as a district, how are we doing in this? And this is why, as much as I said before, I'm not sure that standardized tests are the best measure. We're giving them anyway. So we need to report on them and say that. Now, whether people think that's the best measure or not, we just feel like that's important. I think what the system has tried to do historically is hyper focus on just test scores ever since No Child Left Behind. And what we're hearing, you guys don't have to agree with me, is that we're producing graduates that are pretty solid academically, but are lacking in a lot of other skills that make them kind of life ready, which goes back to this portrait of a citizen and those pieces. So it's not like we wouldn't measure those things when they're younger. It's just, it's such the basic building blocks at this point. I don't think it would be something that would be worthwhile of reporting out as a district, where by contrast, if children can't read, or if they can read, that's an important thing to put out. So that's why, even though we didn't define it, we talked about literacy and numeracy at different levels. Because to your point, if you can't do those basic things, you can't get into the police academy. You probably can't make it through, even if you get accepted. But so that's kind of the idea. But I understand this too. Like, this is going to take a while for us to kind of build and develop. It's not going to be done overnight, and it's
Listening to you about the competency based, I mean, obviously you know that I'm involved with Learning Lab and Reimagining Education to a good degree, and I made a lot of connections. So the competency stuff, I guess, like, as a board member, I'm not, you know, the personalized learning and competency based education, I think that's like a 75-person group, and I never happened to land on a time where I could go to those things, so I'm ending up missing a lot of those things. And I guess I would just like to have, like Lindsay saying, that information about what goes on during those meetings and where the competencies are falling, because to have, well, I think you just mentioned like having a teacher speak to each individual, like students' families, about their competencies and where they're falling. Like the site visit that I happened to do with Reimagining Education on my own, like, personal time as a parent, they did that and it was wonderful for all the students, but you're talking a 30-person classroom with 4 teachers that are able to do that and build that. And I would just really be fearful of making sure we're meeting the educators' needs to be able to do that, because they're already, you know, stretched thin as it is. I would love to know how much time they get with the interventionalists and the coaches during the week, and when those coaches and interventionalists aren't being pulled to be substitute teachers during the week. So when are they gonna have that extra time, and having one teacher doing that with 30 students to have individualized competencies, you know, is learner agency the end goal? How are we gonna, what's that? What school is that? I did the immersive learning exchange. Oh my God, no, I can't think of the school name. There was
Colorado,
two. It was in Denver, Colorado. Embark Education, and then there was La Luna as well, was another one that I had the opportunity to.
So I think, to your point,
I could.
if we
yeah.
tried to shoehorn a competency-based system and didn't change anything else from the way that we were operating, I would agree that it would be too overwhelming for the teachers and it wouldn't work. That's why we're reaching out to people that have been in this work and have kind of told us what's worked and hasn't worked. And I think there are opportunities to do this and to do this well, but again, it's not going to happen overnight.
Right.
And I think, to the point about updating the board, you know, the 3 of us and Meg, we meet before every one of these meetings, and we're always trying to parcel out the time that we have. And thankfully we have these work sessions, but I mean, if you want, you know, we could make regular updates to these action plans part of these work sessions, or we could build them in to later in the agenda. This has been something I've done in previous districts. I haven't wanted to force it But hearing that you guys want the information, I think the staff is hearing
Well,
that.
even just like
Yeah, I
having
actually
me
don't think
share
we
the
just-
information.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we
we're
don't
much
need,
simpler.
we don't need a presentation.
Yeah.
I think it's just like picking up valuable conversations that we need to be having as a board, but if we could get just minutes on what is going on in these meetings so that we can have these discussions, that's what's.
No, I don't so you're not saying don't have it as part of the board meeting?
Correct.
Right,
Okay.
just so we
Just
can
have
kind of read
documents
up
and
on
then
it, like, if we just get
Google-
sent it.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
might, and I mean, in all honesty, that's a lot. I think it'd be a lot easier for the staff as well to be able to, write up what's going on, or even that could be done during a meeting and then sent out to us.
I think that's a good suggestion.
Mhm.
And then maybe that'll prompt questions that we bring back to this setting so that we're not overwhelming the agenda.
Mhm. I know we will be discussing this again numerous times. If you want to move on to just briefly to touch base on goals, because it's like 10 of 7. Board goals. I remember when we sat down a few years ago and during a retreat and set up our goals, and Bob and I were there. The very first thing we had to come up with is what are the areas that we want to put goals under? And at the time, we had come up with 4 areas, which are part of the superintendent's evaluation at this point in time. Student achievement, well-being, engagement, and fiscal oversight. So one of the first things I think we have to decide as a board is what are the headings we're going to have? There could be 5, there could be 3. If you look at the strategic plan we approved, we already have wellness, we have academics, which would be your student achievement. Engagement, I'm not sure. We have citizenship and employability and then fiscal oversight. So we kind of have to figure out what we want to put in, what we think is important. And then, once we decide the main headings, then we can turn around and start putting some, I think it would be a good idea to put some short-term goals in there, which would be for this year, even though we're partway through the year already, but maybe something we could put in, and then maybe look at some long-term goals. So I didn't know if anyone had any ideas as to what might the main headings be. I know we brainstormed and put that all out, and we talked about it for a while before we finally settled on these 4. I have a copy of our old boards, which were taken off the website.
I think I'd like to propose possibly reaching out to Nick if everyone thinks
I was
he's
gonna
been
say that.
having
Yeah.
just a discussion with Nick, and he did want to come back and love to do goals and objectives with us. I don't think we're at a point where we really need to be brainstorming without doing that portion first.
We could certainly be thinking about it anyway, and I think if we're going to attack it, whether Nick comes or not, we're still going to have to decide what are the main areas that we feel we want to focus on or we feel are important. And then, the short-term goals, I think will be a little bit more personalized.
Well, we can start
Yeah.
with the strategic plan and use those as might be,
Yep.
end up being the goals, but
Yeah,
is everyone okay with that?
if our goals aren't aligned with the strategic plan, we're gonna run afoul.
Right.
So, if we may have a breakdown, citizenship, we may break that down to, in the objective. Measuring citizenship, it could be our citizenship, whether we're engaging with the community, whether or not. It could be the citizenship of the students, but it could be, is the board connected to the community? And that would be what we try to do under engagement under the last one. So
Yep.
citizenship could be broader. Employability is probably not an objective for the board at this time, but it's probably something we need to monitor. But it'd be, good to have an objective on employability that we monitor. That, it comes up under the outputs and measurable outcomes, and we could monitor. So, and the other one we had is fiscal responsibility, which has to be a board
Right.
responsibility goal anyway. We have to adopt the budget. Doug has to adopt the budget. That has to be part of what we look at.
Right.
What I'm interested to see is how strategic plans like this with Reimagine and maybe we can talk to Mariah and how they've dealt with the pandemic with a lot of these, because a lot of this is community outreach and going out to businesses and community members and jobs and doing that work. And how did they struggle during COVID? Was there an issue with their strategic plan? Did they not improve on their outcomes due to not having that connectivity with the community? I don't want us to get to a point where if something happened again, where we weren't able to have that engagement in that community, that we would also have an issue. So I don't know how that's happened, or even if you know that,
I could speak to it, but in the interest of time, I think I won't.
Okay.
Not at this moment, I'm not saying, but yeah, we can have that conversation.
So going forward, it looks like, we talked about this at our retreat, having, Nick Caruso come back from CAVE, to look at actually two things, board goals as well as the board evaluation. But we didn't have an opportunity to do that either. We got into roles. So I think we'll pursue that and see if we can do that, but, I don't want to take too long to sit down and start at least putting together some goals. Having something is better than having nothing, because right now we don't have anything specific. So, that we have out there, so, it just helps even if we just keep it general for now.
I think even Nick said even within a few weeks, he could give us some dates. So is everyone okay with me asking Nick what he could do and then see if we all align with it? I can send an email out.
You guys, you don't mind? Another Saturday.
Could you come during one of these work sessions? Or is that not enough
He
time?
said he could. I mean, I wouldn't want to have Nick all the way come out for an hour. So we would have to be able to start at like,
Special meeting,
huh?
like another special.
Could do a special
Yeah.
or,
Or even
Some of
start
us-
at board.
some of us came from building committee at 5, so it's, I mean, it makes it a long night, but I think I agree with you. If he's gonna come all that way, an hour probably
I
is
think it's
sufficient.
important, and we need to get that done.
Yeah,
It'll
I don't
take
think an hour.
3 hours, not 1 hour.
Correct, yeah. Okay, so I think right now we're gonna take a short recess, for like, I'm barely 5 minutes, and then we'll start the rest of the meeting. Yeah, I can take my notes.
I can.
No, I'm good. I'm actually.
Okay.
I appreciate it.
I know.
That's what I am.
Yes, please.
All right.
Putting on.
Are we recording? Well, we are. Okay, good. All right, we're going to reconvene the meeting. And under item number 4, we have some presentations and recognitions, and I understand that we have some artwork from some of our memorial students that are going to come forward. So
So they're gonna use the screen
you're
as
going to
well,
use the
right?
screen? Okay. All right. We also have some. Smiling faces is quite nice.
We're trying.
My only regret is that when we use the screen, the people at home don't have an opportunity to see it. It doesn't show up and we just can't figure out how to make that happen.
So
I'm
I
really
think,
sorry.
We're-
Yeah,
I think we fixed that.
you're
mistake.
working on-
We're trialing something tonight. Here.
Like, oh, perfect, got it. We'll see.
We can't promise. it's
We'll get some feedback from some people that are watching at home.
Good, okay, yes. That's been the only
Anybody
drawback.
think
you know.
that's pretty so roll on so that we do.
Gonna go.
Yeah.
all- Yes.
Yeah, I have it.
You have it, okay.
This is gonna.
Sounds good.
While we're waiting for everything to get set up, I just. Cannot. Hard no right there. Just kidding.
This is Jordan, why don't you talk? Go ahead and talk.
No microphone? Am I still echoing?
Good stuff.
No, that's it, really, not you.
Yeah.
We turn off that microphone.
Yeah.
It's the delay. It's the delay.
I'll go back, why?
We turn off that light.
Yeah.
Is yours on mute?
You're
Where am
as well as some students that represent the third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade, as well as art club. Ms. Longley offers an art club to students that can take part after school hours if they register for that. So they're going to share some.
Keep going.
They're going to share some artwork that they've created during school as well as part of the art club. I'll go run over the slide.
So first, this was the third grade arts integration project. It was our community project with Durham on the green, where they incorporated their science unit into art. So if you wanna. It actually, we didn't even know it was a contest and it won first prize on the green, which was a nice surprise. But we did some paper mache, next slide. We did some sculpting like noodle tools and yarn and pipe cleaners, and they created the 4 stages of the butterfly stuff. And thank you to our PTC and our third grade families that donated those items that we needed to make that a success. So that's all the third grade students all together with our first ever scarecrow butterfly, monarch butterfly. Okay, so now we're going to highlight some of the students. We're going to have Penny and Gino come on up. We had a community day at the beginning of the year. And each class made a classroom banner. So I'm going to have them go ahead and show and tell me.
A little banner for our community building day. We chose the word cool because it represents our students and teacher, because we all think Mr. Bruin is pretty cool. That is why all of our letters look like Mr. Bruin.
And what do you call Mr. Bruin?
King Bruin.
So next we have. So these students are from like an enrichment class that I do. We have 5th and 4th grade students, and we did some model magic sculpting. My 4th graders chose monster creatures that they would sketch out and then sculpt, and my 5th graders chose a habitat that they wanted to put into the soda bottle habitat. So, so this is Kendall right here. That's her little creature. And this is Emily. And this is Cal. Thank you. We have Kennedy and Bowie. They're our 4th and 5th grader. This is our first drawing unit. We're doing an identity theme this year. And so the students have the choice to do their name in different designs. Some chose color, lines, and shapes. We also did symbolism. And so this is Kennedy's right here, color, lines, and shapes. And then we have Zoe. Next one. Oh, it's from. Okay, that's symbolism. And so we'll continue that theme, and we're moving on to our self-portraits next with that. Thank you, Bill. And finally, my art club kids. We just got art club back, which has been a lot of fun. And so our first project that we made are paper mache pumpkins, which they just took home last week. And we've started our fairy garden houses as well. So these are their paper mache pumpkins. Very nice. So that's the rest of the art club things that I have. But thank you for letting me share.
Thank you all for sharing. It's been our pleasure to see your awesome art project.
Say thank you.
Thank you.
And they also left you, one of the classes
Yeah.
doing for enrichment. They did a little file and they gave it to all of the faculty and staff at school. And then also made some to hand out tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And it says Smile, Memorial School artist in Mrs. Lovershell's enrichment class is spreading some cheer with these smiley faces made from clay. We hope you have a happy day. Thank you. I didn't, these are reporters who I believe are, I forget, I know they're not here, I forgot where.
Well, they'll tell you where they are,
Oh, they'll
because
tell
they
me.
had a lot of forethought and made this video, so long as the volume and everything goes well. It's very well done, so let's see how this.
Busy night.
Right, hang on, well,
We're talking.
Don't worry, we'll back it up, like, or I could just read the speech. Like, it was a good idea.
read it. Because you can stop them. And it might take some.
That's what I was wondering.
Yeah, yeah. It's not even on.
Volunteered helping to run the event with over 60 contemporary craftsmen and artisans. Two students also performed taps at Veteran and Troop Honor Session on Monday on the 3rd. Looking forward, as we approach the end of November, we'll begin rehearsing for our holiday concert and planning our poinsettia and wreath graduation. And remember, the Veterans concert is tomorrow at 7, featuring both bands and chorus. It is open to the public and completely free if you want to attend.
As students sing and play beautiful notes and rhythms, the fall sports season is coming to a close. The girls and boys soccer senior night was held the last week of October with winning matches against Westbrook and North Branford respectively. Both teams graduated 8 seniors, some of whom have already committed to play collegiate soccer. The girls volleyball team also had their senior night on October 27th. With a great crowd and tough loss against Kennedy, celebrating 12 senior CRHS girls. Their annual Dig Pink fundraiser of breast cancer awareness was a success with a win against North Branford and Whitney funds raised. The Covington football team still has a way to go in their season and has faced some tough losses, but nonetheless a constant crowd of CRHS cheerleaders, friends, and family. Lastly, the boys and girls cross country team had amazing races at the Shoreline Championships held at Hammonasset Beach Park, finishing 6th and 7th as teams in the conference respectively. The teams also had their annual Go Far Fall Best event with strong school cross country joining, celebrating the right community of all ages. At their senior day, the boys team is graduating 1 senior, yours truly, signing off as XC 2022 captain, and the girls team is graduating 3 seniors. Thank you.
Moving on to some of the let's juniors and seniors will go head to head in our Caucus football game, hosted by the Senior Class Council. 61 girls are participating in the game, and around 30 boys will be cheerleading on the sidelines and during halftime. Tickets are $5 for community members if you'd like to come and cheer on our players and cheerleaders. On October 26th, Unified Prom was held at Milford High School with attendees from Daniel School, Warren School, and Lincoln High School. About 250 people attended the event, including 35 cognitive learners from our technical education and Unified Sports groups. Speakers reviewed about technical education and graphic design classes and included multiple design studies, multiple design sets, 3D printed pieces, and over 7 hand pieces banners. The Bowman's cooking class is baked over 400 cookies, which were placed in hand-painted bags created by the campus education and graphic design classes. On Friday, the Blue Devils Cafe will hold a luncheon for veterans and active members of the armed forces. And finally, let's take a look back at an event we held in October, which was the first ever hackathon. Many CRHS members added their voices to create this wonderful video to promote our academics, clubs, and sports. Welcome to CogCon. 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 As part of the Truck Convention, 7th and 8th graders get the opportunity to see all of the academics, clubs, and sports CRHS has to offer. With high schoolers with all different passions and academic strengths eager to share the favorite part of Cybertruck, we are sure you'll find something you'll love to participate in once you become a Blue Devil.
Will you stretch your mind for AP courses?
Maybe you're excited to take a fun elective course.
Will you score a goal on the soccer field? Or join Unified to have fun?
Will you develop your entrepreneurial spirit in DECA?
Maybe you'll major in a book and book club, or become a member of the Spanish Learner Society. Perhaps you'll sing your heart out in our many choirs.
Play to the beat of your own drum in our many band ensembles. Interested in Deep Blue? Look into our Ocean Bowl team. Love learning about global issues and relations? Take a look at our Model UN and JSA clubs. Hoping to make a difference in your community? Say hello to your new friends at Edge and Care.
Whether you're a math whiz, an English extraordinaire, the next historian for our era, or a budding scientist, Hakachuk has academic classes to both pique your interest and challenge your mind over the next 4 years.
Everything you need to have a fulfilling high school experience is just a Google Classroom code away.
How will you get involved? Welcome to Hakachuk.
Great job.
Christine Monaghan is amazing. She edited that whole CogCon video together. You don't need this again, don't you?
No.
That should help. So, but she wasn't here to film that day, so we are training other people on how to film, and we lost a whole bunch of the video. So she pieced together the pictures. This trainer took all those pictures at the event, so she decided to put those together and made that wonderful video. And then when they decided that they were going to be down the hall today, they said, you know what, it's too important, we'll make sure we have an update by video. So that was completely not only their idea, but they're doing. And on Friday I said to her, so when do you think I'll see it? She's like, I swear I'll have it to you Monday morning. And she did, so it was all good. A couple of things, the concert's at 7:30, that was just misspoken on there. So tomorrow night it's at 7:30, not 7, like she said. And then Hayden is very, he doesn't like to talk about himself. So what he left out of his little report was that he came in 4th in Shorelines. He ran a 16:45 and he came in 4th. I went down and asked him today, he's like, you're not going to tell them, are you? I said, of course I'm going to tell them. And you ran that. And then just one other update, the volleyball team just beat Wilcott Tech in their state tournament game. So we're hosting a game on Friday because we're playing, I think they're number 22. The problem is I have to go back and talk to some young tall men that are playing the basketball tournament for Friday. So now we have competing basketball tournament and state CISA state volleyball game. So we're gonna work on that tomorrow. Gonna try to get them to start a little bit earlier and not have 10-minute halves so that we can get everything in on Friday that they want to get.
And the girls soccer. team
Girls
won the first
soccer,
game.
they won the first game. They play tomorrow, 2:00.
Yep.
Yes, I can't remember who. they
St.
play.
Bernard's.
Thank you, St. Bernard's. And then they would play on Saturday if they win. The only other update I want to give you is next week, we will be in DC. The seniors will be taking the DC trip. We leave Tuesday morning and come back late Sunday or Friday night. Jen's going as well on this trip. So we're balancing the state tournament with that, and there'll be more updates to come once we know where everyone's gonna end up. after Friday.
this Friday?
I'm sorry, we leave Tuesday and come back on Friday.
Are you going this year?
I am going.
Oh, good.
Oh, yeah. I'm actually excited. I admittedly never been to DC, so that's weird, but I've never ever been, and I like this group. They're all good kids, so it's gonna be fun. That's good. Yeah, I spent a lot of time with them over the years. I figured 4 days straight should make it just perfect.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you
so much. Oh, that's great. Item number 5 is public comment. In-person public comment will go first at the beginning of the meeting. Public comment should refer to items that are on the agenda. Is there anyone here that would like to speak?
Okay, we're Kelly. My son Declan, and I'm accompanied by AJ Truman, who is one of our co-captains for the Coggins golf team at the high school. We understand that on the agenda, there is a vote for approval for a trip for our players to attend the Champions Gate Country Club down in Davenport, Florida, for a couple of days at the end of April. And I know Coach Austin was unable to be with us in person. I don't know if he's on Zoom right now or if he's able to hear us, but we were really hoping for the approval from the board to be able to do this trip. It would be a great opportunity for our players. We're really trying to build the program. The students are trying to build the program. My son, as a freshman last year, was the only freshman on the team, and it really helped him build some tremendous friendships, improve his skills, something that he really, really enjoyed. And we're hoping to kind of build the golf team over time. As you know, with golf being the wife of a person who is in the golf industry, it is developing some lifelong skills too. So there's networking, there's things that they can do and learn outside of golf. It helps, we're talking about, citizenship and everything. But I think it would be a great opportunity for our players, and we would absolutely love if we would get that approval to attend. And there will be obviously Coach Austin will be chaperoning, but I do know there are other parents. All of our parents are very interested in their players attending. And some of us parents are hoping to go with them as, unofficial chaperones. So, Amy, did you want to say anything?
I just really think it'll help just the team grow a lot. It'll help like the team bond together, just become closer, just as a team, really. And I don't know what I gotta say.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak? Anyone else? Okay, hearing none, we're going to go to the remote public comment. No, there isn't anybody. Okay. Item number 6, approval of minutes. We have some minutes here. A regular Board of Ed meeting on September 28th. I don't remember seeing those. Were they on our first of all, we have September 28th. We have a regular meeting October 12th, and then the retreat for October 22nd. Does anyone have any corrections or changes to any of those?
I do for the 28th.
You do for the 28th, so we'll hold that one off. How about the 12th, October 12th and 22nd? Okay, so let's have a motion to approve the minutes of the October 12th, 2022 and October 22nd, 2022 meetings and retreats. So we have moved by Lindsay, seconded by
Second.
Bob. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, those were approved. Let's go to the minutes of September 28th, 2022.
On the fourth page. The paragraph that starts with Miss Betty, it should read, she also felt that that they need to get rid of the school choice for kindergarten, not kindergarten. It says the option for kindergarten, it should say the school choice.
Oh, so you can go to
So-
second.
So it should be for kindergarten.
Yeah, school choice for
School choice for kindergarten.
Get way to ruin that for him. You don't want her.
That was my only.
That's the only one. That's the only correction. Okay, so let's have a motion to approve the September 28th, 2022 regular meeting minutes as amended. So moved by Lindsay, second by Bob. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Great. Item number 7 is the superintendent's report, starting with A, strategic plan update.
Thank you, Lucy, and I know we talked about that quite a bit earlier, but this would be a slightly different update. What I wanted to let the whole board know is something that I've talked to a number of you about individually, or you've just kind of heard of it because you've gotten wind from some of our staff members. But what happened about a month or so ago at Brewster Elementary was kind of wasn't on the agenda, but Principal Deb Murray got some feedback from some staff members there that just had some concerns. Anxiety is probably too strong of a word, but basically, you know, in August and September, we required everyone to go through the reimagining gatherings who had not gone through. And I think kind of adding to the stress of the school year were just a lot of questions and concerns and just kind of wanting to know, maybe to use John's term from earlier, some confusion about what are we really talking about here and what's going to change. And so they asked if I would come back to their faculty meeting in November, which I did last week, but the concerns were significant enough to me as they were presented by Deb that I didn't want to wait a whole month. And I also wanted to have an opportunity to engage with staff there in smaller groups because I don't know if you guys have been to faculty meetings or large group gatherings or whatever, but the dynamic is different. And sometimes it's important to put people in a place where they feel like they can just kind of talk. And so we did that in small groups over a couple of weeks. And they were really positive meetings. And I think what was good was that the teachers and the other staff that were involved got to ask really good questions. And where I had answers, I gave them answers. Where I said, hey, we haven't figured that out yet. We kind of talked about that, but I could feel the anxiety level lowering just in the fact that we were engaging. And so Deb and I went back to our overall leadership team and talked about it. And I think it was Jen Keene who said, you know, Doug, you probably ought to go to every school and do this, whether they've expressed concerns or not. And I have to give Jen credit. It was a good suggestion. And so I wanted to let you all know that since going to Brewster, I've now started going to the other campuses. Again, small groups to listen to their questions, their concerns, their enthusiasm, their ideas. And it's really, I think, been helpful. I hope for them, definitely for me, that's the feedback that we're getting in just letting them kind of talk through, because a few things came out. One is that the 3-hour session that we did, the kind of truncated version, and some of you even said this, that had gone through the longer version, it really was kind of like sipping water from a fire hose, if you know that expression. And so although it energized some, it kind of left more people with questions maybe than even answers. And so we were able to do that in the small group setting. Another piece has to do with these action teams. And one of the things I heard loud and clear from the folks at Brewster, and I thought it was really good and bold of them to say this, is like they want to be involved in designing this future for the district. But many of them just do not have the time outside of their regular kind of working hours, either because of other work commitments or family commitments or everything else, to really engage in those action teams. And so we heard that loud and clear. And so what we're doing now, in kind of my wake, if you get the analogy, of going through, is Stephanie and Liza and Tara are also going to go through those small groups, and they are going to gather specific input about what these competencies that we are building should look like, so that they can then take that data back to the action teams. So the action teams, which I think have been, I don't want to say they've been spinning their wheels a little bit with the competencies, but maybe also feeling the burden to do all this work. We actually feel like it's been the best of both worlds. And I think that was your suggestion, Stephanie, actually. So maybe you are regretting that now that you have to go to all these meetings. But I really think what we've kind of said to the folks in a nutshell is what we are talking about is not a system that the district administration or the board or whoever they consider in leadership can design and hand to you and say, execute. It's got to be something that they participate in, that they give input to, and that they can feel ownership with. So I really feel like what started as maybe a concern from one of our schools has now really led us in a very positive direction of being able to reach out to all of our schools. And I just think giving people that voice in that smaller group setting has been very, very helpful, at least in the, I don't know, 8 to 10 small group settings that I've done. It also bears mentioning, we did actually go back to that faculty meeting in November at Brewster because they had asked, and we got a lot of positive feedback about that too, because some of them said, hey, you know, what if someone asked a question in one of the small groups and somebody else didn't hear that? And so that gave them an opportunity as an entire faculty to get all that information out. And I think that's very positive. So I could really talk for another hour on this topic. You can probably tell that I'm energized by it, but wanted to let you all know that that had happened and that will still be happening probably over the next, 6 to 8 weeks. I know originally we wanted it all to be done prior to Thanksgiving. That was probably too ambitious. But again, the feeling is we get that input, we take it back to our action teams, and then we'll be in a better place to even inform this group based on what you said in the work session about where we may be going with all of that. So any questions on that? Board members or staff members, anything to add that I didn't capture there? Okay. Thank you. All right. So a few other updates. One, I'd like to talk about a policy review process idea, but if it's okay with the board, I'd like to defer that conversation until we do the policy committee update because it kind of relates to that last meeting. Is that okay? All right. So we'll skip on that. At our last board meeting, Ken presented a lot of information about reporting apps and other systems that he had kind of researched. And, you know, our kind of takeaway and kind of confirmed this with Lucy and Lindsay during our pre-meeting kind of brief was that although there may be a role to go out and make a large purchase at some point around some of these issues, and we're still open to that, what we really need to develop is some digital format that would allow our learners to report, I don't want to say anonymously, but report discreetly incidences of bullying and other things that they want the administration to look into and not maybe have the stigma of having to walk into the office, even though the forms are there, and get the form and fill it out and kind of worry about who's having eyes on them in that area. So, you know, we've talked as a leadership team, and Jen has also been approached by one of our learners and one of our faculty members with kind of some suggestions around how we might do this through a Google form. So we just wanted to let you all know that we're going to take that input and go back to our leadership team and try to develop something. And hopefully by our next board meeting, we can share with you that is either up and running or at least is ready to go based on that. But again, we've heard this from a lot of different folks. Several board members have also asked that we do this. And again, I don't want to diminish that there might be a role for some of the things that Ken mentioned last week, but I think what we heard from the board was that's great. But in the meantime, can we just develop something locally that meets this other need? So any questions on that? Okay, and the last thing is, and I put this on Parent Square, but I wanted to kind of do this in this setting publicly, but I wanted to apologize for some of the parking challenges we had yesterday with the voting. We had two things going on here on campus. We had some really important training that Kim is going to mention when her report comes in here. And as Deb mentioned, we also had a first round state playoff game that our girls hosted. And you know, my apology is that I didn't think about either of those things going into yesterday. And I feel really bad. And a lot of our staff members also feel bad because any one of us could have thought of that and we didn't. I certainly do appreciate that once it was brought to our attention, state police, they understood too, the ones that were doing the training. So we did take a break. We made an announcement and a lot of folks moved their cars and some of our staff went out there. And I know, Lindsay, you were out there trying to do that. And then even though it wasn't really required, Kim and Deb and others donned vests and went out there during the soccer game. And we were parking people on the grass and we were doing whatever we could in all of that. So, I do apologize for that. And I learned a lot. So if we ever do vote in the high school again, I will be more forewarned and so will the staff to kind of think through those issues and think about a parking scheme that makes more sense. But again, I did want to give a shout out to Deb and Kim and a lot of members of your team. I don't want to name them all because I'll probably forget a few of them, but I got to stand over in the stadium and watch the game as superintendent. You guys were out there doing the traffic duty and there were a lot of cars here during the training and there were a lot more during the soccer game. And I think for the community, the training piece, not coordinating that parking, that's on us in terms of that. The soccer game being at 2 o'clock on election day, that is the CIAC. They said that. And so if anyone thinks we shouldn't have had a soccer game yesterday afternoon, I don't know. We won 3-0 and we're really proud of our girls. So I think kudos to all. So yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Any comments, thoughts?
I just was thinking about the kind of linking the situation that happened yesterday with the discussion that we've had as a board, talking about how we want to kind of make it clear what our role is in the in policy, process, procedure kind of stuff. And I try and stay away. Well, I don't stay away from social media. I try and stay away from community forums, but I love me some social media. But I was thinking about how kind of getting into the weeds in this forum with an issue like that potentially sends the messaging that it is in our purview, as opposed to something that we, when we look at our goals and when we look at evaluating the superintendent, that it kind of goes in that column. And again, these are perhaps just musings. And I think that one of the things that we kind of need to do as a board is to live in solutions instead of admiring the problems. And so one of my questions is, so is there now a system where the town explicitly lets the board, not meaning us, meaning you, know about facility use? Even if it's, because I suspect it's something that's traditionally has been happening, right? That they use the schools. And so there could have been assumptions made by a bunch of people that, oh, of course, we're using the school. And you know what I mean? So like, I'm thinking about what is the system to put in place to make sure that everyone's aware of facility use by event.
So from my past experience in the previous district, when we used buildings were used, we had a spot, you need parking. I don't know that we have that on our building use form. The town does fill out a building use form. We know they're coming. That's not a surprise. They're always welcome. But I think I learned the hard way when my former district, and that's why I put parking on it. And I think that's what happened this time. So I think we'll pay much better attention to that going forward.
Thank you.
And I think it's a hard thing to forecast what voter turnout is going to be and what, and this is where we would defer to our folks that run the elections. What is a reasonable distance to be able to walk? What is a reasonable amount of handicap parking that should be accessible?
Yeah.
You know, who should have priority? Should the poll workers be parking in those spots? I don't know that they were, they weren't. But, you know, the problem is they're now working the polls, so they can't even run out there and move their cars at that point. My understanding is maybe that the afternoon crew did because they knew about the soccer game. But again, I think to your point, we want to be proactive, even if they haven't reached out to us specifically with those requests. Like I said, I should have seen this coming and I didn't, and I feel really bad about it.
Is there communication between the district and the register of voters for the town of Durham? For this event?
What was the question?
Was there communication between the district and the town of Durham register of voters to coordinate this event?
Not with me directly, but typically what they do is they work through Sue Durrell, the facilities department. So Sue always crosses her T's. And so she got the building use form, but I think I don't think anybody thought to talk about parking. Maybe the town didn't know that we were having the PD and
Or the soccer game.
or the soccer game.
And for clarification and transparency, so I was one of the 3 moderators for yesterday's election. I'm also deputy register of voters for the town of Durham. So I also haven't slept in like a day and a half because of this situation. So a lot of it is a moot point because elections will be going back to Horn School. Hopefully there's a CO in that building. So there's not as much planning talking about future elections and parking. But I do have to say that I don't want to minimize elections and say that it's not as important as events that happen in our districts, because the things that happen that day, the active shooter training is incredibly important. Athletics is incredibly important, but the integrity of elections at a federal and state level and the oath that these registrars, assistant registrars, deputy registrars, poll workers, we all take an oath for election integrity. And it is, it's a very serious thing as well. So I would just like to say, and I think that goes along with what Linda's saying, is that we really need to make sure that our building usage coincides with what we're having other people use outside of the district. So it was a mess. It wasn't pretty. And I just hope that we don't have a situation like that again.
I wonder if we might want to take a little bit of Nick's advice from the retreat. It seems like with some things, some people had good experience, bad experience all around. If it's something we want to develop a couple talking points, if people ask us about in the community, or if we want to forego that this go around. But that was one of his suggestions during our roles retreat presentation, that when we come up with something that had, weighted on the community in certain ways, that we have talking points. So if people in the community approach us about it, we're all saying the same thing. Yes, yeah, that was his, and unless I'm wrong, I believe that was his suggestion about certain things that we talk about.
Yeah. So I'm confused where that goes to back with what I'm talking about.
So if someone in the community were to approach us about like the parking and how we could have better handled that I'm having the same talking points as a board member, as Linda would be, as Jason would be.
So do we have an issue where there are discussions that were had by board members? Is that what we're?
No, I'm just saying,
some
overall,
things
in general, for us to be
has
better as
to,
a whole focus.
No, looking at this particular situation, because I'm not sure this would fit with all other situations, any other situations. It's passed. We had, a parent square that went to not only the parents, but to as many community members that have signed up. Doug has just brought it up now, and we've had some, I think the best you could do if someone comes up, say, you know, yes, we're aware of it, and we're making, you know, we're looking at it in the
Have the
future. and
option
just leave it.
from the district to be able to send to the town clerk, whether this is in Middlefield or Durham, you know, we're looking at both towns, but if we have something that's going on and we want to get it out to more than just the parents, both town clerks have access to GovCast. I know Durham does Gov Positive on Middlefield, to be able to send an email to every taxpayer, you know, I think every resident. So it's another avenue we really need to touch on, because we did send to parents, but we had community members that also, you know, could have avoided the area. They weren't voting or.
But I don't think Middlefield has the same capability. Is that correct? Ken?
I'm
I
not
think
aware of
Durham
their
does.
capabilities.
I think Durham does. I'm not sure if Middlefield has all the.
They have a
They have
emergency alert
911.
system, but I don't know if that, and that's not always been used for emergencies, so.
But, you know, we're trying to get it out as much as we can in the community, and based on what happened, I don't think it's going to happen again. I think it'll be, people are well aware of it.
Middlefield has their own issues. Some people go to community center to vote, and then. it was
I know,
a lot of
and people
got
are still
confused
going
with
to the
that.
community center because they moved it over to Memorial.
It was on the state website, community center.
Yep. Oh, my God, it was. Okay. Okay, staff reports, Kim, Director of Finance.
For the month of October, the general fund is 30% expended, and we've received 32% of our budgeted revenue. And MTA, we've expended 17%, and we received 11% of our budgeted revenue. I have just a couple of short little updates on different kind of things that are hanging out there. Just wanted to remind the board that we have the support staff remote grievance hearing on November 30th. From 10 to 12. I will forward a link if anybody wants to join that. I don't have the link yet. As soon as I get it, I will forward it. The independent audit field work wrapped up in October. So now we're just waiting on getting our financial statements and presentation. Usually that happens in December, somewhere around December. They're due statutorily by December 31st. We'll have a couple things that we'll talk about when I guess, Bob, I don't know if you're doing the building committee summary, but I have a couple points here that we'll talk about then. As you know, we will start charging for lunch on December 1st. We communicated that to parents a couple different times. We did expend almost all of our SMART funds with the state. The state said you must use those SMART funds in full month increments. So they did a little calculator to show how much we had left. We have 17,000 left. We cannot use that for a full month. Our full months run between 55,000. And the state initially said we could use that to buy equipment. Now they're saying, well, maybe not. So when we know how we can use that 17,000, we'll be able to, and maybe they'll allow us to offer, you know, one day of free lunch or something. I don't know. We did have the state police, Connecticut State Police training, active shooter training yesterday, which was absolutely phenomenal. The feedback from the staff members is just amazing. I've gotten people telling me they're already looking at their classrooms and they're already using the tips that they learned in the training. I say training really was a presentation with helpful tips. A lot of tips just might seem obvious, but it sparked a light bulb in some people, and they're really taking an active role in securing their classrooms and what could happen and how they would react. It's an ongoing relationship. It's not a one and done. They want to do some training with us. They want to watch our drills, provide feedback. They're going to review our safety plan that we submit to the state once a year.
And they want to come back for a yearly training where they may actually do a mock scenario, nothing serious, but, you know, time people and, you know, how long does it take to, you know, who locked their door and, you know, how can we make it better? Not a, you know, calling anyone out, but how can we make it better? And then also we are working on setting up a security committee with towns. That was a recommendation, Jack Trifalo from Durham. We had met with him and George Eames, a couple of us met, we talked about our security plan, and they want to be a very active player in it, which is amazing. So we're putting together a security committee that we thought we would meet quarterly.
Is that for emergency management?
Yes, yeah. And with Middlefield as well.
And then, with the training, what's, the protocol for the programming to talk to the kids about that after the training yesterday? Is there guidelines for the teachers to be having these conversations?
So really, this was for staff to recognize weaknesses, what to do, how to make your classroom safer. One suggestion that he did make was that drills would be announced and not unannounced, and that parents should know ahead of time. So that's a piece that we'll work on, and then maybe provide talking points to parents to talk to
I
their
do have
students.
a few concerns, and I guess we can talk about this and not in communications, but a few parents today, their kids came home and said the teachers were having active discussions about what they should do in a scenario. And we didn't tell the parents that was going to be happening. So
So that's something that the teachers probably, just because they were so moved by the training, I guess, that they wanted to start getting on that. So that's something I hadn't heard. So, okay, that's good feedback. Maybe that's something that we should say is that don't do it in presence of the children.
Yeah,
This is
but it's-
particularly valuable because, I mean, the old saying is, no student learns if they don't feel safe, and they actively look at the teacher's ability to handle those drills. They know if you know what you're doing or not. So that's great that we're having that training, and they'll feel safe, they'll learn more.
yeah, I think it's
Absolutely.
just important. We're talking about some kids and some kids' needs socially and emotionally, and being able to handle certain conversations at certain levels. I want to protect that.
And I actually think the trainer was pretty explicit about some of those things. And so, yeah, we'll just need to follow up and make sure that that's the message. Also, that something that John had said at a previous meeting, we don't want to share too many details about what we heard, because the point of this is not to give anyone that might be interested in doing us harm, like our playbook, so to speak. And so certainly we could have that conversation somewhere else, but not in this setting.
Yep.
Okay, and then sort of in tandem with that is, I was just wondering, Doug did mention the apps in the reporting, but I was wondering if there's any questions or follow-up from the security. So for like Mutual Link, if you wanted more information about that, or if you thought about it at all, and something that we should consider for next year's budget, or if another security grant comes out. I don't need an answer right now. I'm just putting that out there, that I'd like feedback on that. And Silver
like-
Petroselli.
It just seems like we ought to try the Google thing first.
Yes.
and then-
Okay.
Right.
Okay, well, those are completely different things.
I
So
know,
the Mutual Link is first responders.
right.
Okay, and then Silver Petroselli, the board, you had directed me to get a quote from them as to what it would cost for a study of a K-5 memorial. And they did come back with the quotes. I think I got it yesterday, $26,800 to do their study. There is a breakdown of what they will do for that study. And they recognize Doug and I had a Google Meet with them, and they recognize that we're interested in a June 30 application with the state. So that's something that they can work with. And also, there's a couple different options. There's a renovate as new, and then there's also renovation/addition. Renovate as new is got everything and start over. But we have all these new mechanicals that we just put in there. So that would be just another layer with the state of saying, well, we just put all these mechanicals in here. Can we have a waiver for that? Because we don't want to be ripping out new stuff. The other part of it is the renovate addition pieces, they sort of pick and choose what they're gonna reimburse. So you might actually get more reimbursement on a renovate as new. So I think the option is we'll have them do both Silver Petroselli, put in 2 applications, which we can do, and then I pull the one that we don't want, and I can cancel that. You know, obviously, pretty much at any time, I think you can until you actually start doing the work, so. But when we have an option, we can pull one.
We want to set a time, we're going to discuss that.
So if you want Silver Petroselli to proceed, I need to know that tonight so that they can start working on it. If you want it to go out to an RFP, and we don't have to go out to RFP by our charter because it's engineering and architect services, and they have a history, they've got a lot of knowledge already done, a lot of stuff done. So if we went to a new architect engineer firm, we might not make our June deadline, but I'm open, you know, for feedback from that. They're ready to get started tomorrow if you approve it.
So you need to have an okay from the board to go ahead with Silver Petroselli.
We wanted to have, to be in the minutes, just because it seems like when we floated this idea, we had unanimous, like, let's do this and let's do it as quickly as we can. And this is the most practical way to get this thing off the ground. But like I said, we want to make sure you guys are all okay with that before we engage them and start spending this money.
I think we have a really good relationship with them, and them having the past history is really important.
Does anyone have any objection
We need a motion.
to going with Silver Petroselli?
I don't think we do, as long as you
Yeah,
guys are
so we
okay.
have a
Let me
consensus,
reiterate something
so-
Kim said too, because I'm still new with this state reimbursement thing. What I took away from it is they are going to, like, independently almost give us like 2 design options. And they're not even sure that the one that gives us the better, you know, renovate is new, is going to cost any more because of the way this reimbursement works. So, but it could, and it all has to do with what Kim said, is will they basically let us have like a waiver of these mechanicals that we just did and the roof and all of that? Because that stuff wouldn't be part of this, but if it could somehow be credited because it was just done, and then that could defray from the cost, but still allow us to do something like renovate as new. So I'm just glad that they're going to do both, so that we have both options to consider, both from what we get and also like the delta of the financial investment. Is that what you took away as well? Yeah. And they said they do this all the time for lots of districts, so.
I think we have a consensus. You want to have it as a vote, a motion?
I think we have a consensus. We don't need to.
Just have a
Yep.
consensus. Yep. No one- so you
What's the
just-
turnaround on
from the board.
Well, they've got a lot to do. They said they will have it in plenty of time for us to apply for the June. But that also includes, they will, they're the version, I've got a history with them. They keep the word. And, but they will do information sessions. They will report to the board. So there will be plenty of time. I don't see a timeline when they're gonna have the draft ready. I can get that. One last thing for now is, if people are wondering about the blinking light. Maureen reached out to me today, but I already had it on my report. The blinking light down there on Main and Pickett, unfortunately, we can't do anything about it. We think it was a sensor cut during construction. And we've tried to fix it from the box there, but we can't control it. It's not working from the box. It's been reported twice to DOT, who says that they'll address it, but they have a lot of other higher priority items right now. So
until we have an accident.
right. Yeah. So we've done it twice. Larry Morello, our resident trooper in Durham, also called them, and so we're staying on them. But so we know that if we could fix it, we would. It's not something that we directed. And that's it for.
I just want to ask a question for the rest of the board members, I guess. Again, during next thing, we said, developing talking points after motion or decisions are made, so that clear, concise message is put out by all board members with the decision to move forward with Silver and Petroselli. Do we want to develop talking points for that, or no community members ask us? Or
Well, I would think that the purpose of it is so that we can make
Right.
a financially sound decision on whether or not we're gonna move forward with Memorial as being a K-5.
Right.
So essentially, they're essentially the only people that'll be able to get it done in time because
Right.
they know
And
the
we're
history of
supposed
the
to get that
building
grant.
and everything else.
No, I know, I'm just trying to.
That's
like,
why,
go
that's
along
why,
with Nick's,
that's why
just so we have the
Silverhead
same
Consulting was
message.
chosen, because they have a history and therefore we can get a much more concise report in a shorter period of time. And I would assume it would probably be less expensive too, rather than an organization coming in and starting from the ground up. Secondly, we're doing it to get preparation for the information that we're going to need for the reconfiguration. And once we get that information, it will definitely, if you want to have talking points, it will definitely be going out to the community. And I'm sure we're going to have public hearings to get input. So we are not going to make the decision on the final decision. It's going to,
It's a
you know,
study
we
on whether
bring it to
this is feasible.
Right.
In order to
And
have a
how much it's
conversation with
gonna
the
cost.
community
Right.
and our administration.
so that's where we are. I mean, haven't made any other decisions other than to have them go ahead and get us, just like we did with the demographic study. We got the okay so that we could get an update, so we knew where we were. And then that was presented to the community, not at a public hearing, but it was presented. Okay, any other thoughts?
And just
comments?
to round that out, because Mariah's made this point twice, and I kind of want to honor that. I think.
No, I'm not, it's not like that I need an explanation.
No,
for doing it. Yeah,
I
I'm
want to
just
make
like-
sure,
No,
something
but-
that Nick said
Yeah.
too. I think
Yeah.
what Nick also said, if I recall, was that a lot of the communication to make it clear would either come from the chair of the board or the superintendent. So in the snapshot that we sent out, I stated that this was the intent of the board. I also put it in the central office update to all the employees. And so I think your question is a good one. I just think at this point, there's not a whole lot more other than we are proceeding with,
Right.
with executing the board's direction on this. So you can always point people back to those if it's helpful.
Okay, item number 8B, climate committee update. It says update, but actually this is, I believe, one of the first times the board has ever received a report about climate committee. And part of the reason why I think this is going to possibly be a regular report that may happen, maybe not every single month, but at least more frequently, is because I know there've been some concerns in the community about the school climate, around bullying issues, around which also include racial issues, EDI issues and stuff. And I think we need to understand a little bit more how the district handles finding out what's going on in the climate, reporting it to the board. And in the future, I will be proposing to the board some extensions of trying to have the board get out to the school community and to the students as well to get some more feedback about climate. So, Jen?
Thank you. And it's a nice setup for me saying, I'll go through some of the things I have. But if you have any questions, you can interrupt me, ask questions. Also, if I'm not hitting on some of the information that you want reported, please let me know and I will be sure that it's in my next report. So we have a district climate committee and we have school climate committees, and our district climate committee is based on state regulations. It's based on our policies and our procedures that have been adopted by the Board of Education. And it really, 7 policies address what we look at in the school climate committee, 5 of which you all have in your minutes for tonight for the policy review. So I don't have to go into as much detail, so that's good. But the main one that we look at in our school climate committee is our policy on bullying prevention and intervention. And within that policy, there's an actual a safe school climate plan and our district report forms for bullying, for bullying investigations, for how to report an incident, and then all the investigative
reporting. So that is all right in your bullying policy. That's the 513.8. We also have our equity policy, which we look at in our school climate committees, and that is policy 052. Then there's our non-discrimination policies that pertain to community personnel and students. And in the student non-discrimination policy, there's also reports and forms embedded right in the district policy. So again, the report forms for and the procedure forms within the policy. And then we have our policy for regarding Title IX for students and policy that looks also at Title IV, which is part of the equity policy. So Title IV is looks at race, equity, non-discrimination on the basis of religion, sexual identity, race, those types of characteristics. So when we talked, it was 2 months ago, because I wasn't here last month, we talked about, we had a great question, or a great statement, I should say. That is an event that is not school climate. And so questions arose as what is school climate? And taken straight out of the policy, school climate means the quality and character of school life based on parents of students, parents and guardians, and patterns of students, parents and guardians, and school employees' experiences of school life, including but not limited to norms, goals, values, interpersonal relationship, teaching and learning practices, and organizational structures. So it's not an event. And we're looking at, climate and culture is really how people perceive themselves in the school environment as part of this community, and perceive others as well. And I think that was a very important distinction. Do events help contribute to a positive school climate? Absolutely. Can negative events contribute to a negative school climate? Absolutely. But you're really, it goes back to what you were all talking about. When we're looking at measurable goals and objectives, it's what are we looking at and how do we measure it? So I'm going to go into how the state measures it. And you're looking at things that are difficult to measure, because they're people's perceptions, there's people's experiences, there's not hard data all the time. So they look at the hard data they look at are attendance, office referrals, bus referrals, suspensions, that would be in-school suspensions, out-of-school suspensions, our expulsion rates, bullying investigations, Title IX investigations, Title IV investigations, Title VI investigations. We take that one step further in our district. We look at any safety concerns and updates that come up, our protocols for that. We look at classroom behavior sheets and looking at planned tiered intervention, starting in tier 1 for all students, in terms of making connections and looking at student needs on individual basis and classroom basis. And we also do some problem identification and problem solving in our district climate committee. All the state data reporting is broken up and analyzed and compared to Connecticut norms and percentages, and it's broken down into categories of gender identity, race, free and reduced lunch eligibility, students with IEPs, English language learners. And then those categories are reported. So any of the bullying referrals, office referrals, and suspensions are reported, and the state tallies those things based on those characteristics and does a comparison. And that comparison is public. It can be found on the State Department. It can be found on EdSite, and data on EdSite. And we get our district profile and performance report. The 2021 report is up and available for anybody to look at. It is public, and it has all of our reporting, school climate reporting areas on there, and it's also broken down into all of those individual characteristics. We also have the state also breaks down district attendance reports based on the same characteristics, and that is also out and reported publicly. So for our district update, specifically district-wide, in the month of September, we had tallied 52 office referrals, 20 bus referrals. We have in September, we had no school suspensions reported. We had 59 unexcused absences reported. That means it's an absence that was not called in by a parent or excused by a doctor's note. And we had one bullying complaint filed, but not substantiated. In October, we had 55 office referrals. We had 30 bus referrals. We had 8.5 at a school suspension days. And we had one in-school suspension. We had 66 unexcused absences, and we had in October, the number of students considered truant by definition, which is 10 days in a school year or 4 days in a month that it's unexcused, were 5. Okay. So that is the.
I haven't opened that one yet.
No,
We need more.
it's. So that's kind of the hard data that we collect. The other things that we do as a climate committee, we talk about events. Strong School held their had a scheduled speakers. They had their 2-hour activity crawl. We had our unified meet, which was a huge success. Our unified prom, also a huge success. Care Club has been meeting weekly. I was invited to a meeting, and I was able to go out and meet with the Care Club, and it's an excellent bunch of young learners, and with great ideas and a lot of compassion, and it gives us a lot of hope for who we are as a district and moving forward. We and CRHS has collaborated with Durham Middlefield Youth and Family Services to have therapy dog visits. So those are some exciting events that have happened in the past month. For our district climate committee to-do list, we are doing our annual, we do it annually, but it's supposed to be the Connecticut School Climate Survey is supposed to be taken by students every 2 years. We have dates to do that for the high school and the middle school for this November. And the elementary school dates will be happening in December. And so everybody from kindergarten through grade 12, all students fill out the school climate survey. And we have our past data to look at comparison numbers with that. Our kindergarteners through second graders have a paper copy that has smiley faces, and they do it in homerooms, and they get help from the teachers so that to explain things without trying to be too invasive and, skew their answers. But from grades 3 through 12, it is an online survey. So at the high school and Strong, it will be done during advisory groups or English classes. I forget which we landed on, and at the elementary levels, it will be done in homerooms.
There's
our-
100%
Go ahead.
participation in that?
I'm sorry.
There's 100% participation in that?
In past years, yes. Well, not 100%, but we are in the solid 90s.
Right, because the reason why I'm asking is
Mhm.
because the school climate surveys, you said the last time we did it was when?
2 years ago, 2020, was it
2020?
2021,
Which leads to my question. What
2021.
is the overall health at that point? What is the overall health now, in your opinion? Right? Because we're getting, obviously with board and the community gets a lot of feedback when it comes to articles in the paper saying that there's issues in the schools.
Yeah.
I think this is important, but if it's not being reported, or if they are being reported, you just gave a pretty in-depth report on some of the things that are occurring,
Mhm.
which I'm going to assume get handled, and there's reports that go along with those.
Yes.
But we're still getting a lot that says there's things that are going on and we're not doing anything about it,
Mhm.
which I feel is either got to be addressed or it's got to be quelled, one or the other. So that's why I'd be interested in what the climate was and what that survey said.
Yeah, so after this survey comes out, after we get the results from this survey, it's pretty immediate because it's especially for the 3rd through 12th grade reports. It's right, we made them into Google Forms, and so I get the results almost live in the Google Forms. And then what I will do is I'll be able to do a comparison from our last survey to this survey, and also give you highlights, because there's places for kids, for learners to say what's on their mind within the survey. And last time we did it, I read every single answer from every single student and tallied patterns of response, and I'll do the same, and I'll bring those results to all of you. And
Which is important data, because again,
Yep.
there is a lot of speculation that there's things going on,
Absolutely.
whether they're true or they're not true, or whatever the case may be, but having that data and having these reports, I think, are important, because I don't want anybody to get the misconception that we have an habitual problem here. If there is one, it needs to be addressed. If there isn't, it also needs to be quelled.
Absolutely. Thanks, John. And there's also a parent survey report, and a staff report that we typically do in the spring, but we can do that earlier depending on what our administration or the board feels is best.
Right.
Mhm.
What do we use to collect like referral data? Do we do it in Power School or Swiss or?
So Power School.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it goes into Power School. And so now that's married with the new CT system, and we won't even get started.
I was gonna
with that.
say,
Yeah, I know.
don't say CT Fit.
So, but in Power School, so our disciplinary referrals are in Power School and then reported out through that.
I think it would also be interesting, not necessarily for us, but for that committee to look at the referrals and try and disaggregate by which ones are objective, right? Late for class, like it, where there's no question, and then what are subjective, like insubordination.
Yes.
And again, I don't know that we necessarily need that data, but I think it would be interesting for the committee to look at that.
Yeah, that is one of the things that school level climate committees do, to see patterns of those of behaviors within school. And I know that at Memorial Strong and the high school, they have a very nice office referral form that teachers or staff fill out to make an office referral, and it has more specifics about what the referral is, and what has been done proactively and communication wise with student and parent before it's just given to the principal to handle it as well.
Then are we able to identify those issues by school?
I have it by school. I didn't report it out by school, Bob, because we're so
Right.
small. It's too identifying. So we talk about it, we talked about it as a district climate committee, and we have it by school. I I'm hesitant
Yeah. I
to
understand.
report it out by individual school because of identifying information. I have a confidentiality.
Is there any kind of section on statistics or patterns for repeated behaviors, repeated bullying? You guys had any discussions about that? And if it just happened numerous times or it's continuing
That's tracked over time. Mhm. Yeah,
along with like restorative practices, correct?
yes,
Okay.
yep. And again, all of that is in the referral paperwork, the complaint forms and the referral paperwork and then the follow-up. And so any substantiated incident, we develop school plans and personal plans for students that have proactive measures, that have restorative measures, that have disciplinary actions that are very clear and precise on what the student is expected to do and what the teachers and staff are required to supervise as well.
It's also important to note that that's confidential.
Without a doubt. Yeah.
Well, a lot of people don't understand that.
It's highly confidential and it's easy to talk about in general terms. It is very challenging to talk about any incident specifically at any given time because you cannot you can't give the information out about how you're disciplining a child or how you're what the care plan looks like and what the safety plan looks like or intervention plan looks like to anyone.
And again, I mentioned that
Yes,
just because of
thank
the
you.
fact that people say nothing is being done.
Thank you. Yes, it's a great point.
I mean, would it be helpful to give like a school climate update maybe at every meeting? And like
They only meet quarterly.
So we
But
meet
I-
quarterly, but I can do the monthly reports. Yeah, no problem. That's, again, it's.
Yeah, I think it's
Whatever
whatever the
it
board's,
wants.
whatever the
Right.
board's
Mhm.
pleasure is. To
Yeah.
Jen's credit, this is the
Did a
first one
great
she's been asked to
job.
do like ever.
Yeah.
And so she honestly had like 3 to 4 hours of information if you all wanted it, but the board officers asked that you limit it. But so we want to take it from the board's view, like how often we had originally thought, I think the three of us, that maybe it would make sense to report kind of immediately following each of these quarterly meetings.
Yeah.
But if you want it more frequently, that's at the pleasure of the board. Jen just needs to know.
I think I have a little bit of issue every month with these statistics because of how small our school district is, between parents, students. It's very identifiable if there's been rumors that haven't been talked about, and then we're talking about a statistic for either an expulsion or a suspension. It can identify our students, it can cause more bullying, it can cause problems within our community. So I would ask us to really think about that.
Yeah. And I can do it not just on the statistics. I mean, we can talk about, I said to some people, I was like, well, we can do a weekly, graduate level class on school, school climate and get so much out of it because there's so much information and, that comes through the climate that comes across my desk because I'm looking at every incident in the district from a medical, if the child bumps their head on the playground, I get the report. So you see what I'm saying? Any DCF referral or phone call that has to be made, it comes through and I take all of that into account. But again, all of it, the medical piece, the DCF piece, any referrals, any questions or concerns is also highly confidential. There's very few people I can share that information with.
Poor
And
Jen
it's
lives on an island.
Yeah, and it's with the building principal that it directly affects and Doug. And so, again, there's a lot I can share with you in general terms, but very little I can share in specific detail.
I think the confidence is that the general public needs to understand if you guys are dealing with these situations.
Right.
That they're being dealt appropriately, right? So the confidentiality piece is nothing you can circumvent. So I think that's important for everyone to understand. And if there was something not being taken care of, then that's an issue that we would bring up with the superintendent.
Absolutely.
I just think that needs to be abundantly clear because we just constantly continue to get. I get them. I'm sure other people on the board get them as well too. If there's a problem, there's a problem, there's a problem, but we can't speak.
And I hear that from learners, right?
Right.
I heard it, when I was a psychologist. Well, so-and-so does whatever they want and they don't get in trouble. And you're like, well, we don't talk about other people. I wouldn't talk to you about, talk about you to somebody else and can't do, and vice versa. And so I get that. And it's hard for people to really understand it. That you can't even talk about it in general terms. I get phone calls and I tell people, I can't even tell you if that child goes to school in this district because of HIPAA and confidentiality.
And working in nursing administration, I completely understand that.
Yeah.
There's phone calls that I can answer.
Well, like
as well.
John said, the bottom line is something is being done about it.
Bullying and the word bullying that's used out there in the general public, and the definition of bullying investigation.
It's kind of like my analogy is the difference between depressed and clinical depression, right? A lot of people use bullying as a term, saying I'm bullied. Sometimes it's two kids are in a fight and they're both not getting along. But there is the definition of bullying is repeated. I put it in my notes. It's in the policy. I'm not going to read it to you, but there are 3 specific characteristics for it to be bullying. It's not just if somebody's being unkind, although we don't want people to be unkind and we will address it. But bullying has very specific criteria.
Jen, in your professional opinion, you had mentioned if we do quarterly reports or monthly, however you want to do it, you're not going to be school specific. And that's kind of
That's my
that's the way to
recommendation.
go.
That's my strong recommendation.
Yep.
Because
But I also think we're looking at numbers, and if there's one number in a statistic, that number is identifiable to a student.
without a doubt.
And that's something that I trust Jen to make those decisions, and she won't report on something that's gonna put somebody at risk, so.
And I think going forward, you talked about doing studies, students are doing we're doing the climate study for the students. So I think going forward, that's one of the pieces that we probably will want to get some feedback on, especially a comparison. Okay, and along with the comparison is then if there's increases or whatever, what will the district do to change what their practices or what additional practices will they put in? So you have the students and then you're going to have the staff and the community, which I believe are going to come at separate times. So, going forward, I think those would be the 2 areas that I would assume the board would want to have some feedback on.
And I do want to share some of the things that, some of the new initiatives that we have been working very hard on.
School climate, maybe not just the numbers, like
Yeah,
maybe the
some of the
numbers,
good- yes,
but
yeah.
within school climate is, I'd love to know what each school is doing with DEI monthly.
Yes.
Like,
yeah.
where can we fit that in? So maybe having school climate as a standing agenda item would encompass those kinds of
Some of
things.
those, yes.
And then maybe you give us
exactly.
the numbers quarterly if everyone feels more comfortable with that, but then we can talk about all the other things that the schools are doing, to prevent bullying,
Absolutely.
to have DEI.
Yep.
Brought into any school, because those are the things I would love to know.
Yeah.
As well, and I think that's worth a monthly.
Say something to Lucy's comment.
Mhm.
Jen was the one with your first draft, and I know the measurable outcomes, we decided, it might be 10 years before we approve those. I get that. But the first draft had the youth and family studies or youth and family services kind of risk survey, which we had just gotten a hold of in the summer and we sent to you all. Jen kind of felt like this state district climate survey is a better measure of some of these things, to Lucy's point. So that's why we took
Yes.
the youth and family services out. Not that that's not good data.
No, it's great data.
But that does the whole
We've seen
community
that.
and the state one targets the learners that actually attend our schools. So we think that's more kind of germane to the boards and the districts.
Especially
kind
in
of-
a district where so many kids are not in our current school system.
Right,
They're in
right.
towns,
Yes,
so.
that's true.
And they're measuring different things than we do in school climate. We're not measuring the school climate survey is measuring school. in learners' feelings and thoughts about school and
It
directly.
might be a good way for you to gauge community climate. And I think
Yeah,
that's a great thing. But I think the state guidelines and those statistics are a much better measure and a much better indication.
Yep. So I'm just gonna highlight a couple of the things that are new initiatives and big plans, in addition to CTFID. We have a new system that we're gonna be implementing. It's a state system that they're piloting, and we jumped right on board with the pilot, but I believe it's going to be a requirement next year. It's a mental health survey called yes, DESA, thank you. The company is called Aperture. It is an online survey, brief online survey that adults fill out on every student, which when we're looking at learner-centered education, and we're looking at learner-centered mental health, the DESA that's within this Aperture system is a rating for looking at every child's mental health. And it's like a brief 4 or 5 question risk assessment to make sure that all kids are safe and feeling safe, and looks at kind of mental health red flags, and that is for every student in the district. And then if any red flags come up, and then there's a longer rating scale survey that the adults will fill out, so that we can really track the mental health and well-being of all of our students, not just the ones that come across. As educators, we know some of our students sit there quietly, and we don't know if there's a problem until it's, until they're too late for them, right? And so I have high hopes for this survey that the system that we will be able to really connect with all students on a very meaningful level in terms of how we see them and their mental health.
What do you do with the information?
I'm sorry, I can't hear.
What do you do with the information if a student is screened and a red flag comes up?
If a red flag comes up, and all of this information, there's parent, you haven't done it yet. So we're gonna have, I'll share all of the documentation in the process. This is just kind of, a snapshot. So you're aware when you get it that, oh, okay, I remember we talked about this. But if there is a red flag on the brief questionnaire, then there is a much longer questionnaire that we fill out for all students that come up with under this red flag. And then the system is actually really nice because it dovetails school counseling best practices right now, looks at a CASEL model, which is an mental health intervention model. And it dovetails intervention strategies to the CASEL model, to educators for students that come up with, any concerning areas of mental health.
Are we doing K-12?
Yeah.
Are the high schoolers self-reporting or are the teachers still doing it?
Well, we thought it was self-report when we signed up for the pilot, but right now it's. So we're looking at it for advisory. Gonna roll that out slowly.
Is it still free? Is Aperture still free this year?
It's free this year. Yep. The state, the state has purchased it, and so I thought we should probably take advantage of it after, after our year last year and our dedication to really trying to connect with the mental health and well-being of all of our students. This is a good way to do it, starting in the tier 1 level. you know, it's a well-researched and supported system.
Do we have, what districts are currently using after?
I don't know. I honestly,
It's
it's
huge.
pretty
And
wide.
Linda would probably know.
Yeah,
which-
dozens,
Yeah.
because the state had started last year. Because the evaluation system, you know, the allowances and the changes said do it on SEL,
Mhm.
but there was no
Nothing for
way to collect that data. And so DESA, they used DESA and Aperture.
Mhm.
And so the state's paying for about 30 districts to do it right now. And
Well, that was my question. We're going back to budget.
Yeah.
Wondering if it was something
various
that was
degrees
falling
of
within our-
success and buy-in.
Yeah, I think they're going to continue to pay for it because I think they're going to require it. So we'll see how that works out. Yeah.
All right, I was gonna say, that's never stopped them. from
No,
funding
no, you're
the
absolutely right. No, I think that's how they're getting people
Yeah.
to sign on. Yeah, at least for the first little while, right? So more to come on that, but yeah. But they're a little wrapped up with our CT SED system right now, so we haven't haven't gotten a lot of conversation about Aperture. But, we also have partnerships with the Root Center out of Middletown for counseling, community counseling there in schools. And we have started a partnership that's at the high school level. And we started a partnership this year. We signed the contract with Community Health Center for having community counselors use space within our schools at Memorial and Strong. So we started that partnership this year as
Are
well.
both those-
That Root Center is at the high school,
These are the second one.
and the second one is CHC, Community Health Center.
And those are specific to children. It's through their health insurance. It's
So
through families
so
are involved with
it's a
that.
partnership where we give them the space. And they take our students, but it goes through, but it's almost like it's community services. So it goes through, the child's independent insurance, and we collaborate with them on the logistics, but not on the cases unless we have a signed release.
Okay.
So
That's
it's
what I make that
private,
clear.
it's
It
private
sounds,
therapy.
you know, We're
Yep.
bringing therapy into the schools. I want to
Nope.
make sure that people
No.
understand that that's just,
And
we're
that's-
giving the space for that.
We're giving them the space and really it's to help families, because it's hard to get, therapists and clinicians, particularly after school. There are wait lists that are miles long, and so it's really just that partnership to offer, to our students and families that are looking for, therapeutic services that can't do it after school, or can't get an appointment after school, or can't commute for,
And I know Reed's been there
Support.
since, at least before COVID. Have you noticed, the utilization of it? Is it getting?
So we just started it last year at the high school, and it's just starting up this year at Strong and Memorial.
So there was a break in when it was first spoken about until it was actually used and
Yes,
implemented
yes.
because of COVID, right?
Yes,
And to go further on that, the kids know about it. Like
Yeah.
this, like if a student was not, wanted to talk to someone.
yes. And so, yeah, our guidance counselors and our counselors and principals are all aware of it. And so, yeah.
Any other questions?
Do we have to make a decision on how often we get like updates on it, or is that just?
Well, I think Jen, you may have information in November with regard to the surveys, the student surveys. And I'm sorry, it's November, December maybe.
Wow, maybe not.
It'll be a quick, I can probably give you some quick numbers on the surveys. It'll be a quick turnaround, but I can give you something on it in December and.
I think when Jen has things to report,
Yeah.
other than quarterly, I think,
And I
she'll let
think
us know, right?
Right, but I think.
Yeah, it's your guys' decision, really. It's sometimes if it was a standing item, then she'd have to come up with stuff each time, and so I like it more to defer to following the meetings, plus, like Lindsay said, whenever there may be something significant,
Right.
we'll just add it.
Or if the board does have a.
Right, or if you guys
Okay,
learn.
if you have
questions,
some- yeah,
then we can always present those to Jen, and Jen is here at all the meetings.
She is.
So, was a great report. And I think just based on the comments and questions that you got from everyone, that I think it was well needed and well appreciated. Thank you. It was well put together. Thank you. And well put together. Yes. Thank you. Number 9, new business. I think I'm gonna be like Howard for building committee. Can we get out by 9:30? We may make it before 9:30. Part A, HVAC, grant, resolutions.
Yep, so when I spoke earlier about the systems that we put in place at Memorial, Memorial Mechanicals. Just recently, as recent as September 14th, State of Connecticut announced money grants for HVAC upgrades. They announced it on 9/14. They had 2 information sessions, one on 9/30, one on 10/14. And they said it's due December 1st. So that's next to impossible to do a new project in that sort of turnaround. However, we did have the Memorial Mechanical project that we already did. So we asked, is it a retrofit? Does that apply? And they said, yes, they have some money that they have dedicated for retro projects. It's limited, so I don't know how much it'll be. But so tonight, what I'm doing is, because this was not a state construction grant project, we didn't need the building committee. Oh, they were involved in mechanicals, but we didn't need the resolutions that I need if I'm going to apply for the state grant. So because I have to apply, or I'm going to apply now, I will need those 3. There's some 3 resolutions that are just standard state. You have to do it every single time you apply for a school construction grant. And then the 4th one is just to approve the ed specs, which again, very standard. I'm gonna just give you a little brief as to what the ed specs say, just so that you know when you're voting to approve it, that it's what you understand it to be. I don't know if we'll get the grant. I don't know if we'll get a portion of it. I don't even know how much they're saying each district, but this cost us $2.5 million, which was paid out of our bonding, our 6.9 million bonding. So whatever we can get, and if we get our 53%, hold on. So it's worth trying. So we're in a good place. Essentially, the memorial was built in 1961, and there was a renovation in addition in 95. At that point, the central steam heating plant was renovated in 95. So this project replaced the existing HVAC equipment that reached the end of its life. So most of the HVAC equipment was over 27 years old. And this includes conversion of the facility from steam to hot water heating, which improves energy efficiency and temperature control. Building health concerns are also addressed by improving ventilation rates and air infiltration to reduce airborne contaminants and the spread of infectious diseases. Ventilation is added to the corridors, which is currently unventilated. So let's see, it includes new classroom unit ventilators, a gym air handling unit, and an antiquated controlled building automation system. So this has already been done. And Jimmy is just, well, I don't know, Jimmy's last day is tomorrow, but Jimmy was working over there. As a matter of fact, we had a little bit of a pizza party at lunch for him. He was late to it because he was over there doing this. So I just need the resolutions tonight if you're interested in me applying for this grant. And if so, and we go ahead
So we
and do
vote
that.
on each one.
We have to do them individually.
You have to
Yes.
do each one individually,
Yep.
and then I have the 4th one that's not written on there, but that'll just be a motion to accept the Memorial Middle School education specification, which is just what I highlighted.
Motion to accept. Motion to accept the
The
memorial.
Memorial Middle School educational, well, Middlefield Memorial School is how. We'll put it. So motion to accept Middlefield Memorial School educational
These don't say
specification.
Memorial School.
That's educational specification.
Doesn't matter.
I guess it doesn't.
I just think the language should be consistent.
Yeah.
You just make it Memorial School since.
Yep,
it's the
that's
other
fine.
three.
Memorial School education specifications.
Okay,
So
so these
the
others
first one-
also have to be voted on, each of these.
Each
resolutions.
individually.
Separately.
One, resolve that the Regional School District 13 authorizes the Regional School District 13 Board of Education to apply to the Commissioner of Administrative Services and to accept or reject a grant for HVAC indoor air quality grant at Memorial Middle School.
Okay, I guess we need someone to make that motion. And then someone to
So
second
moved.
it, no vote, Bob, made by Bob, seconded by John. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed, abstentions? Okay,
Number 2, resolved that the Regional School District 13 Building Committee is hereby established as the building committee with regard to the HVAC indoor quality grant at Memorial School.
made by,
Sure.
I'll say with Bob, and
Second.
seconded by John. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay.
Number 3, resolved that the Regional School District 13 Board of Education hereby authorizes at least the preparation, schematic drawings, and outline specifications for the HVAC indoor quality grant at the Memorial School.
So moved.
Yes.
Yes.
Second, yes.
Jason, all right. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Great.
Or
Last one.
motion to accept Memorial School education specifications.
Yes. Made by Mariah. Second,
Second.
second by Jason. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay,
Good enthusiasm at 8:47.
I know. We're gonna try. Okay, are we all set with that? That's it. Thank you. Perfect. Okay, item B, finance, we're finally getting the finance committee to meet. I believe their meeting is next week. And I wanted to appoint a member of the building committee to that, especially because we're going to be having some reconfiguration pieces that come before the committee as well. And I wanted to recommend that Nick Biella be put on the building committee, the finance committee. He has a lot of banking experience with Bank of America. He's got 30 years. He's a senior vice president now. He has 10 years of commercial real estate lending, which includes construction. So I need an approval by the board to, I will make appointment. I'll make that motion.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, along with Nick, there is going to be a representative from the Durham Board of Finance, who I believe is Jim Martinelli. And also a member from the Middlefield Board of Finance. Right now, Michael Skelps, who's the chair, is looking for someone. We don't have a specific name. I didn't know if we had to officially appoint them on there. But I just wanted to let the board know. Do you know if we have to?
The town appoints those members.
No, they're
No,
on
this
top
is-
of the appointed members.
Oh,
This would be,
addition
that's
to the
from the Board of
appointed members.
Finance. I think it's under your purview to appoint
To
those.
appoint them, okay, so I just wanted to let the committee know, the board know that. Okay, we now have a vote to approve the high school model UN field trip, which I believe we got copies of, and I believe this has happened before.
I have a couple questions. Do I do that?
Well, I can
before?
make that motion
Okay.
for discussion.
Okay, all right,
Discussion.
Yes,
discussion.
please. I have a couple of questions. It says the cost to students is $250. And it's 2 nights in a hotel in Boston. So I'm wondering how that. So I feel like there's something missing from the request form.
Is there anybody else?
Sure.
Is it DECA? Is it DECA?
We share rooms.
Okay, so is it being subsidized by, like, is there a model UN budget, or is there, because again, $250 per student for 2 nights, including the registration, they attached the costs, it's like $75 per student to participate in the event. So that takes that down to $175 for 2 nights in Boston and travel there and back.
So the travels by van, the teacher's taking the school van,
Okay,
so we're not paying DACA.
Okay.
Anyone, I don't believe. And I believe there's 4 kids to a
4
room.
kids to a room. so-
Okay,
And then at
okay.
at a convention
sure,
rate, that's
I
probably,
believe it's Emily Bill, I don't.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm sorry, sometimes I suffer a little bit, but Emily's done it pre-COVID, she did it quite often, so I'm sure she has it down to a science, and it is not subsidized through any budgeted stuff.
And then she left blank, or whoever filled out left blank, the question about if a student can't afford it, are there funds available?
And the answer to that is always yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's within our regulations.
And again, it's not filled out on the form. So, okay, cool. I'm good.
The only question I had, it said see attached agenda for what they're doing. I didn't see that attached. I'm happy to like say yes, go, because they've been doing it. I just want to know. What the.
I can get that, I can get that
That's
too.
all.
I'm sure it was probably there, and maybe it didn't.
There's a bunch of
transfer
things
from the
attached, but I just don't
Scan. I can get that too.
Glad that our kids are participating in Model UN. It's been a important part of my family. My son's daughter was in Model UN. She carried that through college at University of Chicago. She ended up teaching it in Beijing and in Dubai. While she was in college, and so the opportunities of Model UN can be great if the student really wants to excel in it and carry it through into the college. I can see that, kid from Martha's Vineyard giving a course in Model UN in Beijing, that, pretty, exciting for that. And I just hope our students take advantage of the Model UN because it's an important program. It leads to citizenship and globalness of all of our programs, and be good for them to come back to the school and talk about it.
Nice.
Oh, and I do have another question. Sorry. So because I always, it says one chaperone. And although I agree with a small group of kids who want to go to Model UN, in theory, one adult is not a preposterous idea, except when an emergency happens. So I'm curious about, do we have a policy as to a minimum of 2 adults or a teacher to student ratio for overnight trips?
I don't know that. You know that?
I don't know that we have one. I have not seen one. And again, I'll say she's done it for years alone. I'm not that makes it right.
Right.
But she was not, she drives around.
Which is
Are they
crazy
seniors?
talk.
What year are they? Is it all 4 years?
Yeah, Julia knows.
Julia.
I'm Secretary General of the Model UN.
Nice.
Jewel, answer the question.
Come talk to us.
It's like, I don't know exactly who's going to boss mine, but it's mostly like super well-behaved kids, and it's mostly juniors and seniors. I think we have one freshman. So if there were an emergency to happen, there would be a lot of kids who would be really capable of helping out. I know that some of them who are coming also have a driver's license and are 18. So technically it's one chaperone, but there are going to be some other very capable students.
Yeah, the insurance company doesn't, the district
Yeah.
insurance company
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily count them as
I also
adults.
think the proximity, unlike DC,
Right.
the proximity is, hour and a half versus, DC,
So keep that in mind when I ask the same question about the golf trip.
Oh, boy.
you go.
So my only question, and I know this just remembering from COVID, is Boston University still requiring people on campus to be vaccinated? And it's not within the forms?
Sure, I can't say what Boston University is doing. I do know that my daughter's university, and I don't know if any of you have the same experience. They are not collecting vaccinations anymore. They can require masks, but that would be not until the trip, just before the trip, that they would decide if they need to wear masks.
The actual field trip request itself, I have no issues with, and I'd be willing to go forward, but I would like to get that information and make sure that we're not discriminating against any students that currently could be unvaccinated and going on that trip. Because I know Boston, that was the issue last time. Okay, any other questions? Okay, all those in favor of the UN trip?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, the next trip is the high school golf team field trip. We'll put a motion on the floor and then we'll have.
I make a
discussion.
motion.
Second.
So we have a motion by John to
Yep.
approve it, seconded by Jamie. Okay, discussion.
That's it.
I can't
Yeah,
find it.
no, like,
I'm just gonna take a seat at the table.
Yeah.
Everything.
so
I don't know.
this is more an issue of transparency than anything else. The cost per student is $1,300. Does that $1,300 per student pay for the coach's trip?
Yes.
I was looking over that.
I can speak
Yeah.
more to this, but that's not, yeah, absolutely. No, it certainly does. So, you know, Coach Austin is planning on going. We also, in the $1,300 cost is really, the parents know that we are going to be paying out of pocket for this trip for our students. And we're going to be supplementing that, or for any students who can't afford it with fundraising. We currently have, you know, about $500 right now already in the budget from last year that we had. From various activities, so we're going to be using that. This trip we determined is to really cut costs at the end of April, just for those 2 days out of school. We understand because we couldn't get another, you know, staff member to attend with us because of, you know, obviously the timing of the situation. So with the chaperone and everything, it was going to cover our coach's cost and everything as well.
And I, you know, again, I just asked that for transparency because, but you know, the adults that go are on duty 24/7 instead of their contractual 6.5 hours. So I am not pushing back on that as an idea. I do, again, want to ask you had said, I think that there are some more adults that may go.
Yes.
Because again, it's not misbehavior. That's the question. It's a medical emergency.
So, and here's another thing too. So I'm planning on going on the trip with students, and I think another one of Coach's concerns, because we also have girls on the trip as well. So it would be nice to have a woman attend as well. I know that there's another mother as well that wanted to go. But as far as chaperones, I have this question. It has to be someone, a staff member within.
I don't know. I don't know what the board policy
Because I
is.
know there's, you know, background checks and all those things, but
Right.
I also work in another school district, so I've already been background checked beyond. So I didn't know if that would count or not. I
believe that is the policy though, that it would be
it
our
has to be
chef.
someone, our chaperone, yeah.
yes.
Yeah, I believe that's correct.
I was
Yeah.
curious. I thought that would be the case.
Yes, and the coach falls under our staff.
Yeah, the coach.
Is that past practice or is that policy?
I don't know the answer to that. She's
I
okay.
believe it's past practice.
The other piece of this that I don't know if it was mentioned, if it was, they are being coached down there by a PGA professional. There's
Yes.
somebody that's going to be on the courses with them.
So parents have never gone on the DC trip? Is that,
So parents have never gone on any field trip,
well, that's what I'm asking.
not just DC.
For
day
trips. I'm talking about overnight. So,
I think there needs to be a staff member.
no, it has to be, but I'm saying in addition to that, is it past practice or is it policy that we don't have parents?
Yeah,
I don't know. I would just want to know if the DC trip has ever been chaperoned by anyone other
I
than.
don't think parents have gone on the DC trip. What about Disney and Myrtle Beach?
I don't believe so.
No,
Okay.
it's staff.
Okay.
I don't know if it's a policy or past practice. I can find that out, but yeah.
I'm just curious. It's good for
Chaperones,
Parents to understand. Yeah.
chaperones for field trips that are out of state or overnight must be certified staff or adults over the age of 25. Spouses of certified staff who are chaperones may accompany a field trip at the discretion of the superintendent. Students from other districts.
Is that a regulation or is that policy?
That is policy.
It's policy.
1983. Sweet.
I only asked.
That's the next, I was gonna say that's
In
the next.
discussion with our policy, that is one of the policies I pulled out, so I don't want to. All right, have any discussion on?
Or adults over the age of 25.
I think it's a great opportunity for our kids.
Yeah, I agree.
I was just wondering to set a precedent for other.
It could.
They could, they come up with their own funds.
And
So Bob, to that point, when we were in discussion with AJ and the coach and Todd Petronio, they originally wanted to go at a different time and more days off from school. And I sort of pushed back and said the most I will allow is 2 to 3. I think that's what I told you to do, 2 to 3 days. And so it was much more expensive for them to do it this way. They could have gone the first week of April and the cost would have been much less. But I don't think setting the precedent, to your point, of any sports team being out of school for a week to go play in a warmer climate, whether it's, now or spring or whatever, I didn't think that was the right way to do it. So we compromised. The golf team definitely worked hard to, and the parents, I know it was a hard sell, worked hard to make that sort of an even keel, because last year with the 2 music trips at the same time, it was a very difficult week of school for the kids that were still here, the kids that were gone that thought they had stuff. It's not equitable, and it's very difficult to balance. So that's why I went back. So could it set a precedent? Yeah, but I'm sticking to the, no more than 2 missed school days. I think for Costa Rica, they're missing 2 as well. When Kate Drummond takes them to Costa Rica in February. I can't keep up. I'm not going on that one though. Just so you know.
Okay, any other thoughts? Okay, we have a motion on the floor. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay.
Thank you. They're all appreciated. And thank you for doing that. I know that came on short notice because they really want to start that fundraising. So,
Okay, moving on, item number 10, committee reports. The policy committee meeting. Bob, maybe you can explain a little bit about the first read, because we do have some new members that may not know exactly.
Under our policy adoption process policy, we will bring the policy draft, policy, we go through the committee, it'll be brought to the full board for the first read, which is just, this is policy we're considering. It then has to come back for a second read, and then adoption at the second read. And that's primarily it's been there so that everybody gets a chance to actually study or think about it. And that it has time for public input if there is any public input in it. But that's how the process works. We have on emergencies and other issues like COVID only had 1 read because of the nature of the issues. So that there are options to go by and to change it. So the first one is the meal charging. This is brand new. So Lindsay offered to read it because it's something that affects the general public more than it does any of the students. So you might want to.
Frozen on me right now.
Yeah,
Here. Caring is caring.
I think I have a paper one if you want.
Oh. Series 5,000 students meal charging policy. Regional School District 13 Board of Education, the board quotations, recognizes the importance of providing nutritious food to students in Regional School District 13. The district. The board is a sponsor of the United States Department of Agricultural, USDA, Food and Nutrition Services, Child Nutrition Programs, including the National School Lunch Program, NSLP, and the School Breakfast Program, SBP. The district shall adhere to the federal and state guidelines and regulations pertaining to these school child nutrition programs. In accordance with federal law, the board will make a public announcement and notify parents and guardians of the eligibility criteria for free and reduced price meals and provide information regarding how a household may make an application for these benefits. Such notice and application will generally be distributed at the beginning of each school year. Charging meals. The district uses an automated payment system, prepayment system for student meal accounts. Students whose accounts have insufficient funds and who do not bring a meal or other funds to school to pay for meals may charge meals to their meal accounts. Students will be informed of their right to purchase a meal, which excludes a la carte items for any school breakfast, lunch, or other meal offered by the district, even if the student's account has insufficient funds. The board prohibits publicly identifying or shaming a student for any unpaid meal charges, including but not limited to the following: delaying or refusing to serve a meal to such student, designing a specific meal option for the student, or otherwise taking any disciplinary action against the student. Collection of unpaid meal charges. The district's effort to recover from household money owed due to the charging of meals must not have a negative impact on a child's involvement and shall focus primarily on adults in the household responsible for providing funds for meal purchases. The district shall consider whether the benefits of potential collections outweigh the costs that would be incurred to achieve these collections. For purpose of this policy, delinquent funds means unpaid meal charges. The district will contact parent, guardians, and students who charge meals to their account in order for the district to collect the delinquent debt. The first such communication will be a written communication by mail or email after 3 meals have been charged. Subsequent written and verbal communication with parents or guardians concerning delinquent debt may be made by the district business officer designee as may be necessary and appropriate. All communications regarding unpaid meal charges shall be made directly and discreetly to parents and guardians. Written communications to parents and guardians regarding collection of a student's unpaid meal charges shall include an application for free and reduced price meals, information on local food pantries and the Connecticut Department of Social Services Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, and any link to the town's website that may list any community services available to town residents. In the event the students' unpaid meal charges are equal or more than the cost of 30 meals, the parents or guardians of each student will be referred to the district's homeless education liaison. The board shall comply with applicable federal and state laws and other federal or state requirements concerning the collection of unpaid meal charges, including but not limited to relating to delinquent debt and bad debt as referred by federal law and record keeping relating thereto. The board may accept gifts, donations, or grants from any public or private sources for the purpose of paying off any unpaid charges for school lunches, breakfasts, or other such feeding. Dissemination of policy. This policy shall be provided in writing to all households at the start of each school year and to the households transferring to the district during the school year. This policy shall be provided to all district staff responsible for its enforcement. In addition, school social workers, nurses, the homeless liaison, and the staff members assisting children in need who may be contacted by the families with unpaid meal charges shall be informed of this policy. The district shall maintain to the extent required by law documentation of the methods used to communicate this policy to households and district staff responsible for policy enforcement. The district shall provide this policy to the Connecticut State Department of Education during the administrative reviews. The superintendent or designee may, if necessary and appropriate, develop administrative regulations in furtherance of this policy. Legal references, state law, Connecticut statutes 10-215, lunches, breakfasts, and other feeding programs for public school children and employees, and the State Department of Education School Health, Nutrition, and Family Services Operational Memorandum, number 11-22, Connecticut statutory requirements for unpaid meal charges in public schools, dated June 5th, 2022, and the State Department of Education Bureau of Health, Nutrition, Family Services, and Adult Education Operational Services Memorandum 4-17. Guidance or unpaid meal charges and collection of delinquent payments dated November 2nd, 2016. And I'm almost done, guys. Federal law 7 CFR Part 210 National School Lunch Program, 7 CFR Part 220 School Breakfast Program, 7 CFR Part 245 determine the eligibility for free and reduced meals and free milk in schools. U.S. Department of Agriculture, Food and Nutrition Services Policy Memo SP 46-216, unpaid meal charges, local meal charge policy dated June 8, 2006, July 8, 2016. U.S. Department of Agricultural Food and Nutrition Service Policy Memo SP 47, 2016, unpaid meal charges, clarification on collection of debt, delinquent meal payments dated July 8, 2016. and U.S. Department of Agricultural Food and Nutrition Service Policy Memo SP 57, 2016. Unpaid meal charges, guidance, and Q&A dated September 16th, 2016.
Okay, so this is our first read. I don't believe we're gonna vote on it tonight. We'll wait till next week. Maybe we'll have Lindsay read it again.
Okay.
Maybe not. Maybe we'll refer to the recording.
It'll be in a minute.
Great job reading. this one. Why don't you know that? I didn't hear.
Yeah,
But it'll be,
But I add on one thing, just so that you know, a USDA policy is that any unpaid lunch accounts are reimbursed to the food service by the general fund. So the general fund, your
Yeah.
budget, town budget pays the food service. Right on.
You gotta read it again now because there's an addendum.
I was going to.
That's on the addendum, that's just the,
process.
when they talk about what they're referring to, that's what.
Anyway, that's, it'll be in the minutes, so the next time we won't have to read it. The next, three, non-discrimination, are in hiring and, variety of other activities related to both the community personnel and students. They've, the federal law or state law, I guess, state law, has added in that, I think you have the
We have,
copy there.
we have colored.
Colored
copies
version.
in line and-
They've added harassment into the current non-discrimination. They've added a qualifying other than honorable discharge for veterans. And they've added some issues on gender identity and things like that throughout all of these. They added general identity and sexual orientation related to complaints. They added a new process for complaints, but generally these are just modifications of a currently adopted policy. Rather than read it through, which is 4 or 5 pages, that we added to the minutes as read.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yep.
And on Title IX, sexual discrimination and harassment, they've actually added the same type of words.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
So those are changes in state statute. We don't really have much to do other than accept the state changes. in the
Except
statute.
for our policies and. except-
So if they'll go in the minutes, it would be, the first read will be accepted, and then we'll vote on them at the next meeting. So the minutes will be long.
Item B, building committee meeting report. Just, oh, I'm sorry, you wanted to say something about policies.
I'm not
Thank
sure I
you.
want to, but I'm going
I
to.
just,
I think
I
it's
got that
important.
here.
One of the things we talked about at policy committee, and then we talked at leadership, and then back with Lucy and Lindsay, is we get updates from Shipman and Goodwin, who's the service that we pay for, and that's what these changes are modeled. But as was referenced earlier, we have other policies in our manual that, if they're not part of a Shipman update, might just be something local, and they might have been around for a long time. And so what we are recommending is that we take each series within the existing policy manual, and there are 7 series right now. There's 8 if you include the equity policy, but it sits alone. And so I think we need to try to make part of this process to push it into one of the other sections that we would bring by series. Any shipment updates germane to that series, but also that the policy committee would review basically all the policies in that group to see if they're all still relevant. They're outdated, that we consider deleting them or updating them in some way. And if we do this, it's going to take us till about June to get through all of this. It's going to be a lot of work for the policy committee. But so the meetings might be a little bit longer than they were in the past. So I just want to, we talked at the policy committee meeting about a process. This is the process that the staff and I think is a way to do it. And to do them by series so that at least we're on the same general topic each time we go through that. But if you all feel like that's too aggressive, or if you think June is too long and you want us to schedule 2 policy committee meetings a month, or again, this is whatever the board's pleasure is on this. We stand ready as a staff to do whatever you want us to do in this space, but I just think we don't really have a process for this now. And we
that's-
need to.
And that's kind of why we are where we are, because we
Yeah.
have so many that have,
Hasn't always been updated.
lack of a better term,
And this has
backed
been
up.
true in my last 2 districts, and we did something like I'm suggesting, and it works. It's not,
Jamie and I were involved in, the last time was 2019. We went through every one we could. The superintendent sat there and amended them online as we talked, Doug. And, we went through updates from all the updates that we had from Shipman and Godin. So, but that's been 2 years. There's been a lot of changes.
yeah, and my understanding from.
We didn't look at ones that had no change.
Right, and so we want to put our eyes on each one of them. And again, if this is too aggressive,
You'll find
Yes.
out after the first meeting.
yeah, but we just, again,
It
before we
It
would
also
start.
might be aggressive, but at the same time, it's something that the Board of Education is tasked with as one of our main jobs is policy. So I want to say, yes, it's gonna stink for lack of a better word, but if it's something that we really.
So should we start? The other thing I would say is what I just described, I don't think we can spin up by next Wednesday. For an entire series, plus I think some of you know on the committee, I can't attend next Wednesday because I've got the teacher of the year event in Hartford. So I guess my question is, do you want to meet next week? Or do you want to just let us start gathering and gear up for December?
Yeah,
That would be my recommendation.
I think December probably, but you got,
You know,
somebody has to go through and say this is, like the 1983 policy.
We're prepared to do that as a start for the discussion, but to Lindsay's point, the board really has to be okay with what we're kind of bringing forward. And I mean, first the committee does, and then the whole board. So this will not only load up the policy committee agenda, it could potentially load up the regular board meeting docket as we sit here at 9:18. I want to make sure the whole board wants us to do this like the policy committee kind of said, for those that aren't part of policy committee.
the only thing I think is if you're gonna go by series, if there are a lot of policies in the series. maybe
You need to split up
you
the
could
series,
Split it up
yeah.
a little
We
bit.
can, and
instead
if
of
we
doing
do that, then
it
they
all
won't
at
all be
once.
done by June, which again, I'm okay with. In previous districts, we've taken like a year to do something
Yeah.
like this, but there seemed to be a sense of urgency with the policy committee, and I wanted to
Well, if we
honor
have to
that.
split them up and say there's a series within
Right.
2 months, we could have a second
Yeah.
special policy committee. I'm okay with doing that. I don't know.
Yeah, well, let us take a crack at the first group and then to
let's
the
see how it
point
goes.
about, see how it goes and then.
Administration, all right, would be you guys.
Yeah, I don't want to be
Yeah, no, you guys have
pessimistic
to
and say
do
we can't get it done. I'd rather try and see how.
And I'd rather kind of bite the bullet and get through it than make it extend out for too long, but I hear what you guys are saying. We got
Yeah.
distracted with our time as well.
We have a meeting, scheduled policy for next week.
He's
That's-
looking to cancel.
I was suggesting we
December.
cancel that so we can gear up for December, but part of that's selfish because I can't be there, but
Maybe Nick can come back. Maybe Nick.
That's a possibility. It's a possibility. Okay, moving on, we have the building committee meeting update, which we just had a building committee meeting just before our work session. And we're down to 9:20.
All right, I'll be 2 minutes, 3 minutes. First, the first item we talked about was school reconfiguration. You already talked about turf. There's gonna be a study this spring whether or not it needs to be replaced. We have 550,000 put aside for replacement. Memorial building roof is done. There's a punch list that has to be finished. We should be next meeting. The memorial mechanicals we talked about with the HVAC, that's done. There's a leak in a boiler that they're trying to get it, that's new, that's trying to get fixed. But that's the only thing left on that agenda. The pump house, for fire protection, there's a lot of discussion about whether or not it should be in the building or in the separate pump house that's at the end of the parking lot over here. The idea was to, we needed a flow test on the flow in order to determine the pump size based on the flow of the water coming into the new public water system, so that it's been scheduled, been contracted, and then once we get that, we'll get an option on the pump size. And then their decision, the kind of their confirmation was that the only really place to do it is outside and in one of the sites near where the current pump house is, which is underground. The culvert is done. It will be paved next Tuesday or Wednesday, depending on the rain, from the same contractor who's doing Main Street and Picket Lane. So they'll do the culvert paving first, then the main road paving. So that's supposed to be done by the same contractor, so it should, if it's going to be delayed, we'll know it right away. And they're supposed to have a schedule on it, and then there'll be a schedule for it'll be closed, probably looking to close during school, not at drop off and pickup, but when they close Main Street, that'll be closed probably for the whole day, and they would like not to have the buses drive on it for the first final pavement. So the rest of paving of Picket Lane, they met with a meeting with Nate Jacobson, the design engineer, and they've got a proposal for a reclamation of the material rather than reconstruction. And they're looking at getting a bid RFP out on whether or not it can be stabilized with different material. All of these will save substantial costs on the repaving and trying to get the whole thing ready to go for next summer. So there should be a budget decision that will come up sometime around March. We should get an answer where we are with the cost of that. The RFP, and the final one was the RFP for the storage building, and whatever is out, the return of the RFP is for November 28th. And they also have two proposals on fixing the concrete base to straighten it out. And that'll be done in conjunction with it. So we need to fix the concrete. It's some juts in and out, and this will straighten it out for the foundation. Those costs will be around $20,000. So that's where we are in that. We'll know in the end of the month. We have a proposal that we can afford.
Okay. Item number 11 is communications. I only have a couple of letters that came through. These are ones that did not go to the board directly. One was from Cindy Felicia Kenyon, sharing an FYI regarding her concerns about political social media comments. And a second one from Tina Marie Olszewski regarding a bus issue, which was handled by Kim. I received 2 more emails today, which I don't have on here, which I'll talk about next time. Did anyone else have any other communication?
I received a communication from a learner in district about which I support as well, the possibility of having a student as a board member that holds like a non-voting.
That's one of the
Oh, it's
ones that I will, yeah.
Oh, I was just reporting because I received the
Came and
email, so.
I hadn't addressed it, so I didn't want to say anything
Okay.
so far. Okay. Anyone else?
One of the emails you got was about having diversity.
Yeah.
That one you got today. So
Yes, there were 2, right. There were 2 emails. One came first, one came second, but like I said, I'll bring them up at exactly what they were about at the next meeting. I think one of them went to the whole board, the other one did not. Item number 12, anyone else?
I just had the communication in general. Did we decide how we were gonna be doing the introduction to the public since the thing with Parent Square didn't work out with all of us submitting our like bios and pictures, right? Were we gonna revisit?
Well, as I said, not all the board members were comfortable with that, so I'm not exactly sure how we could do that. I mean, we could take a group picture so that we're all there and we just tell the community who we are, not necessarily who we are name-wise.
That's not necessarily,
but,
just
you know,
point of order, that's not a
But it's
communication.
not
to the
on here
public, so we
anyway.
can add that to the next agenda.
Yeah, I
That's
talked
why
about how we
could
want
talk
to do
about the
that.
next agenda
Yeah.
since we didn't circle back.
Okay. Item number 12, public comment, refers to any items that are not on the agenda. Do we have any in-person public comment?
Hi.
You're still awake?
My name is Julia Talbot Slagle. I'm a senior at CRHS. I'm also the student who reached out about making a student board member because I like to talk. I just wanted to say, first of all, thanks for passing the Mountain UN trip. I'm excited about that because it's my last year here. So I really wanted to go to Boston again because we went last year and we couldn't go because of COVID. So another thing I wanted to say was that I think part of the issue that some of the board members have discussed about feeling like about the public feeling like there's not enough the issues within the district about racism, sexism, homophobia not being addressed by the board. Part of that is that the board tends to focus on only the positives. You guys have these, I'm sorry, the board has these reporters come in and they announce the positive things going on, and there's the art show and the climate. I mean, Ms. Keene's climate thing was really good, but it also still had a lot of focus on the positive. But the thing is, when the board doesn't recognize these negative issues, that's why it seems to the public like they're not being addressed, because the board that isn't really taking accountability for these problems. And there's a lot of focus only on the positive, and it seems like a lot of these issues are being ignored because there's not a lot of discussion about it. And one big way to help that would be if there was a standing agenda item about climate, where the board was consistently discussing change that could be made. And like this agenda item would kind of be focusing on what's lacking within the system and what can be, what you guys can do to address it. So I think that's part of the reason why the public tends to feel that way. I think that's everything I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Is there anyone else? Anyone else? Okay, anyone online? Yep, we have one. Maureen Funk. Maureen, if you can hear me.
She was here.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes. There you are.
Okay, great. Thank you. It's Maureen Funk. I live in Durham and I have 3 kids and Strong in the high school. And I did miss a couple minutes of the climate discussion while I was transitioning from in person to at home. So I apologize if I missed something. And thank you. And I know it's late. I'll be brief. And thank you for all that you all do. And Jen, for your climate report. I think it's excellent. And I think it's definitely a great start as to the direction we need to be heading in. I also think there needs to be a lot more discussion about the students feeling engaged and belonging and seen and heard, because I have neurotypical, generally good, well-behaved students. And right now, 2/3 of them are not engaged, not feeling seen, not knowing who they can turn to, not enjoying school at all. And my family, along with many others, are deciding whether or not to send 8th graders to school here next year. And as much as the behavior problems and numbers and whatever are important? Are they really gauges of climate? I'm not sure. But I think until we realize that we have a big problem with lack of community and lack of belonging and
Maureen, hold on.
I'm sorry, I think you just
There you
lost
are.
me for a
You're
minute,
back.
but I think you get the point. I won't belabor it. I just think we're missing a large part, maybe if not perhaps the biggest part of the problem is that we have a large section of students who aren't badly behaved, who aren't failing, who don't have special needs, who are feeling really disengaged and left out right now. And it's hard for them and it's hard for their families. And I know that we're going in the right direction. I just hope that there's some more positives that come of it sooner than later. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. Is there anyone else?
No. Okay, hearing none, we have a motion to adjourn. Yes. Okay, second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we made it by a couple minutes past 9:30. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.